Chapter 1361. Huh, my arrow. Duan Lingtian frowned. He discovered he was unable to retrieve the arrow at all. It seemed like the inscription formation had failed. Don't tell me it's because of the gravitational pull here. This was the only conceivable explanation Duan Lingtian could come up with for now. Previously, he had heard from Shuinai that the magnetic field was different in the Dao Martial Saint Land due to its uncommon gravitational pull. Due to this reason, many inscription formations would fail in the Dao Martial Saint Land. If I had known about this earlier, I would have chased after the arrow. The speed of the arrow that was shot out by the arrow light shower is much slower than my body and arrow synchronization anyway. Duan Lingtian felt a little regretful. It's your turn now. Duan Lingtian's gaze quickly shifted toward the 30 over remaining wild beasts. An evil smile soon crept up on the corner of his mouth. Whoosh, 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 comma. After Duan Lingtian cast another round of his arrow light shower, the remaining 30 over wild beasts who narrowly slipped through the earlier attack were all killed. Not one was left behind at all. Body and arrow synchronization. As the arrow fell like rain, Duan Lingtian raised his hand and shot out another arrow. He had solidified this arrow using his true energy. The moment the arrow was shot out, he stepped onto it and quickly gave chase. Just as he was inches away from the ocean surface, he successfully grabbed onto the arrow that he shot out earlier and retrieved it. Boom, 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 comma. When Duan Lingtian was about to leave after retrieving his arrow, the ocean below his feet suddenly emitted a peculiar noise. In the next instant, the ocean below him began to rage. Leave now. It's the blood of the obsidian pangolin that's attracting the other wild beasts. A pleasant voice entered Duan Lingtian's ears and warned him at this moment. Duan Lingtian instinctively lifted his head and discovered the person who warned him was the young woman among the group of 3 people hovering in the sky. Without any hesitation, he stomped his feet and soared up into the sky. However, he was still too slow. Boom, 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 boom. As a loud noise reverberated in the air, the ocean's surface raged with waves, and a few gigantic figures appeared around Duan Lingtian. Horror dawned on him as he glanced at his surrounding. He discovered that he was surrounded by many different wild beasts. The first 3 wild beasts that appeared made him feel helpless. Their speed was horrifyingly fast, they were almost twice as fast as him. They had to be at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. Damn it, I've hit a hard rock. Duan Lingtian's face was grave. He was confident he could kill a wild beast at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage with the help of his sun-shooting bow. However, the difference between him and the wild beasts at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage was just too huge. Even if he used his sun-shooting bow, it would still not be able to bridge the gap between them. However, Duan Lingtian was not a person who would just sit and wait for death to come for him. In the face of the 3 wild beasts at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage that was charging at him, he remained calm and focused his attention on one of the beasts. Meanwhile, his true energy charged out of his chi-si along with his 15 saint veins and reached his hands in just a blink of an eye. With just a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian's brute strength erupted. With his true energy, he managed to pull the bowstring of the sun-shooting bow a little before he let go of the arrow. Arrow light strike. The arrow that was shot out immediately disappeared into thin air. When it reappeared again, it was already embedded into one of the wild beast's eye, blinding it. Roar. The wild beast that was blinded in one eye by Duan Lingtian roared madly. Its speed increased, and it arrived before Duan Lingtian soon after. Damn it! Duan Lingtian was horrified. His arrow was stuck in the wild beast's eye, and he could not retrieve it at all. At this moment, he could only solidify his true energy into an arrow and perform the body and arrow synchronization to dodge the wild beast's direct attack. However, he had underestimated the wild beast. Roar. Almost at that instant when Duan Lingtian stepped onto his arrow and flew out, an ear-deafening roar exploded by his ear. What came next was a black figure that seemed to block off the entire sky. Sound of death. The moment Duan Lingtian realized he was being followed, he instantly cast the only short-range offensive technique in the colossal arrow-light arrow, the sound of death. The bowstring of the sun-shooting bow, the dragon tendon of the 5-clawed devil dragon, trembled as True Energy's light blades swept out and headed straight toward the wild beast. However, the True Energy light blades only managed to leave marks that were neither deep nor shallow on the wild beast. Moreover, it only served to enrage the wild beast further. It was as though it would not stop until it had killed Duan Lingtian. Don't tell me that Duan Lingtian, I'm going to die here without even stepping on the Dao Martial Saint land. Duan Lingtian was horrified. Escape into the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Elder Huo's voice resonated in Duan Lingtian's ears at this moment. Due to the violent quake in the space inside the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, Elder Huo, who was inside the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, came out to have a look at Duan Lingtian's situation. He quickly reminded Duan Lingtian when he saw he was about to be killed. Escape into the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. I thought the space inside the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda is unstable before the fourth level is fixed, and it would send me flying out. Duan Lingtian was surprised by Elder Huo's words. However, without any careful considerations, he entered the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda with just a thought in his mind. The moment he entered the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, he discovered a repelling force on his body that immediately pushed him out. Boom! The moment Duan Lingtian was pushed out, he was sent flying by the wild beast's slap. Needless to say, he was severely injured. It was a good thing he managed to escape into the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, even if it was just for a moment. Otherwise, he would have died. It had helped him to avoid the wild beast's killing blow. The force of the wild beast's strike that landed on him was just the remnant force of its killing blow. The Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda can also be used this way. Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded as he gripped onto the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda that had almost fallen into the ocean. He really thought he was going to die earlier. Roar! When the wild beast that was blind in one eye saw Duan Lingtian was still alive, it became even more enraged and pounced toward him again. The other two wild beasts at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage followed suit as well. Looking at this situation, even if I manage to dodge one of the wild beasts' killing blow by hiding in the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, I'll still most likely be killed by the other two wild beasts when I'm pushed out. Duan Lingtian smiled wryly. He completely dismissed the idea of entering the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda again. He might be able to escape once but not twice. Whoosh! At this moment, Duan Lingtian had a bitter expression on his face when he thought he was going to die. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew past his face, and a figure appeared next to him. He was surprised when he saw the person who had appeared before him. He could tell this person was one of the three people hovering in the air, watching the scene. It was the middle-aged man whose head was wrapped in a silk kerchief and holding a fan in his hand. His appearance was that of a scholar. After that middle-aged scholar appeared, he spat out a word at a speed that neither hurried nor slow, scram. Almost as soon as the middle-aged scholar's word left his mouth, the fan in his hand disappeared into the sky. At the very least, it disappeared from Duan Lingtian's sight. In the next instant, Duan Lingtian was stunned. He saw all three of the wild beasts at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage were sliced into half. After the upper halves and lower halves of their bodies were separated, they fell to the ground with eyes as big as saucers. The moment the three wild beasts at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage died, the remaining wild beasts instantly came to a halt. Fear could be seen in their eyes as they looked at the middle-aged scholar. Although wild beasts were not as intelligent as humans, they were still living things who understood the law of the jungle. The moment they saw the wild beasts that were more powerful than them had been slaughtered, they began to hesitate. When the fan returned to the middle-aged scholar's hand, the surrounding wild beasts roared and ran away, plunging into the ocean one by one and vanished without a trace. Duan Lingtian, who managed to escape death, took a deep breath before he regained his senses. He quickly thanked the middle-aged scholar even though he was confounded by his strength. "Thank you, senior." The middle-aged scholar looked at Duan Lingtian wordlessly. He could not help but recall the scene earlier. He already planned to make his move when the purple-clad young man was about to be killed by the wild beast at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. However, he did not expect the purple-clad young man would suddenly disappear just as he was about to make his move. Initially, he thought the purple-clad young man had concealed his real strength and regarded his disappearance as him displaying a speed that even he could not see through. It was completely out of his expectation to see the purple-clad young appearing again in the next moment. Although he managed to dodge that killing blow from the wild beast at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage, he was still injured by the remnant force from the wild beast's killing blow. At that time, he began to realize the purple-clad young man did not actually conceal his real strength. Instead, he had cast some special technique that allowed him to vanish for a short period of time to dodge to the wild beast's killing blow. Senior. Duan Lingtian began to feel chills running down his spine when he saw the middle-aged scholar continued to stare at him wordlessly. Could it be that this man who looked decent actually had that kind of preference? At this moment, Duan Lingtian felt slightly regretful. If he had known earlier, he would have chosen to be born a little uglier. Sometimes, being too handsome might not necessarily be a good thing. Duan Lingtian made up his mind. If this man really tried to force himself on him, he would rather die than give in. He would rather die than be humiliated. It was easy to imagine the middle-aged scholar would probably slap him and regret saving him if he knew about the thoughts running through Duan Lingtian's mind. Finally, the middle-aged scholar retracted his gaze and asked with a smile, "You're from Fuyu Town?" Fuyu Town. Upon hearing his words, Duan Lingtian was taken by surprise. "What's that? You don't know about Fuyu Town?" This time, it was the middle-aged scholar who was surprised. "No," Duan Lingtian smiled awkwardly. "Ever since I left my hometown, I've been lost in the vast ocean. I've traveled for several months before I finally arrived here. Fuyu Town is in Fuyu Island. Do you see the island over there?" At this time, the young woman had also descended from the sky and pointed a finger at the island in the distance. Coincidentally, that island was also Duan Lingtian's next destination. "I was actually about to go there to ask for directions as well." Duan Lingtian smiled. "What are you doing here actually?" the young woman asked, perplexed. "I'm lost." Duan Lingtian smiled wryly before asking again, "I can see that the gravitational pull here seems to be very strong. Is this place far from the Tao Martial Saint Land?" Chapter 1362. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the young woman cried out in surprise, "Why, you're not from the Tao Martial Saint Land?" "Yes." Duan Lingtian nodded. He was confused. He did not know why the young woman in front of him was surprised. He must admit this young woman was very good-looking. Although she was not as beautiful as his two fiancées, she was still a beauty. Due to her earlier warning, Duan Lingtian was quite fond of her. "Could it be that you're actually from the mortal continent?" The young woman stared at Duan Lingtian as though she had just seen a ghost. "Yes, I'm from the mortal continent." Duan Lingtian nodded and asked in confusion, "Why are you so surprised?" "Wait a minute, let me confirm a few things. Are you born and raised in the mortal continent? Or are you a native of the Tao Martial Saint Land who migrated to the mortal continent after you're born?" the young woman asked again. At this moment, Duan Lingtian realized whether it was the middle-aged scholar or the young man who had just descended and had used his spiritual energy to probe him earlier. Both of them were staring at him curiously. "I was born and raised in the mortal continent," Duan Lingtian replied truthfully even though he did not know why they were so interested. "My goodness. Why, you're basically a monster," the young woman exclaimed with a hand covering her mouth. Although the middle-aged scholar did not lose his cool, his eyes lit up. When he looked at Duan Lingtian again, it was as though he was looking at some peerless treasure. As for the young man, his face had turned solemn, and his eyes contained a hint of jealousy. A person born and raised in the mortal continent could actually kill 100 over wild beasts at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. The obsidian pangolin, with his own strength at only the age of 35 years old. "Don't you think you're a monster?" the young woman replied when she saw the confusion on Duan Lingtian's face. "Oh, so those wild beasts are called the obsidian pangolin. Wait a minute. How do you know my age?" Duan Lingtian was muttering to himself initially, but he exclaimed in surprise when he recalled the young woman mentioning his age. His real age this year was indeed 35 years old. Other than a few people who were close to him and those people in his hometown at the Darken Dynasty, not many people on Cloud Continent knew his real age. However, a stranger had correctly guessed his age. How could he not be surprised? Earlier, Yi Man had used his spiritual mystic technique to probe your age, the young woman replied. "There's a spiritual mystic technique that can detect age?" Duan Lingtian was astonished. He finally found out why the young man probed him earlier. As it turned out, he was checking his age. The spiritual mystic technique that can detect age is not rare in the Tao Martial Saint Land, the young woman replied. "Oh, that's right. I've yet to introduce myself. I'm Guo Li from the Guo clan of Fuyu Island." The young woman introduced herself as she looked at Duan Lingtian. "I'm Duan Lingtian from Cloud Continent of the Mortal Continent." Duan Lingtian smiled in response. "He's Yi Man, a disciple of the Fuyu Island's Yi clan. I apologize on his behalf for his rude action earlier." Guo Li proceeded to introduce Yi Man who was standing beside her to Duan Lingtian. "Guo Li, don't you think you've interfered too much? What do you mean by apologizing on my behalf?" Yi Man snorted. "I, Yi Man, am not willing to just be friends with anybody. What qualification does a low-class person from the mortal continent have to be my friend?" Low-class person. The moment Yi Man's words left his mouth, not only did Duan Lingtian turn solemn, but Guo Li and the middle-aged scholar's face turned solemn as well. Then, does it mean you think you're a high-class person? Duan Lingtian asked nonchalantly as he narrowed his eyes to study Yi Man. I don't dare to speak about the others, but, yes, I, Yi Man, am a high-class person in front of you. Yi Man said condescendingly after he lifted his head up and snorted. I won't make a fuss for Guo Li's sake. Put aside the fact that such a high-class person like you are unwilling to be my friend. Even if you're willing, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm willing, you know, Duan Lingtian said mockingly after he took a deep breath to suppress the anger that was rising in his heart. Yi Man's expression turned angry. He was about to attack when he noticed the look the middle-aged scholar had sent his way. He could only suppress the rage in his heart at this moment. However, his eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Duan Lingtian. I'm Lin Qingrong, the middle-aged scholar introduced himself with a smile after he glanced at Yi Man from the corner of his eyes. Senior Lin, Duan Lingtian bowed respectfully again. It was neither humble nor arrogant. Duan Lingtian, the reason I came to Fuyu Island this time is to recruit young, gifted martial and Dao cultivators on behalf of Mount Hill City. Guo Li is a gifted martial cultivator whom I recruited from Fuyu Island. She's only 27 years old, and yet, she's already at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage, Lin Qingrong explained to Duan Lingtian. 27 years old, and she was already at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Duan Lingtian looked at Guo Li, baffled. It did not cross his mind that the young woman who looked quite beautiful was already at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. The most important thing was she was only 27 years old. She was 8 years younger than him. What a genius, Duan Lingtian mused inwardly. He thought he was already a genius on Cloud Continent, but when he came here, he only realized no matter how good one was, there would always be somebody better. He only reached the early stage of the mortal shedding stage at the age of 35, and yet, Guo Li was only 27 years old and was already at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. The difference was just too huge. Duan Lingtian, please don't make fun of me, I'm nothing compared to you. Guo Li smiled wryly. You're the one making fun of me, aren't you? Duan Lingtian smiled wryly as well. I'm 8 freaking years older than you, but my cultivation base is only so low, how I yearn to dig a cave and hide in there. Duan Lingtian's words amused Guo Li, and she giggled. Duan Lingtian, do you really not know or are you just feigning ignorance? What? Duan Lingtian was stunned. The cultivation environment on your mortal continent can't be compared to our Dao Martial Saint Land. On top of that, the cultivation resources you have are also far from being comparable to our Dao Martial Saint Land, Guo Li explained. In the Dao Martial Saint Land, there are countless people who have already entered the early stage of the mortal shedding stage at the age of 27. However, I'm sure it's very rare for someone like you to exist in the mortal continent, right? Guo Li asked when she reached the end of her sentence. There are countless people who have entered the early stage of the mortal shedding stage at your age. Duan Lingtian was absolutely dumbfounded. Although he had long heard from Shui Nai that the martial and Dao cultivators in the Dao Martial Saint Land had a very fast cultivation speed, it did not cross his mind that it was so extreme. There were countless 27-year-olds at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. Guo Li is too humble. Indeed, there are many martial cultivators like her in the Dao Martial Saint Land, but how big is the Dao Martial Saint Land? Just in the area that our Mount Hill City is in charge of, she can already be considered as a one-of-a-kind genius martial cultivator, Lin Qingrong chimed in. At the same time, he looked at Yi Man who was by his side and said, Guo Li's the strongest among the younger generation in Fuyu Island, and Yi Man's the second strongest. Duan Lingtian nodded. It appeared that this Lin Qingrong had just taken 2 of the strongest people among the younger generation from Fuyu Island in just one sweep. Yi Man's also a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. He's 29 years old, Guo Li said. Although Duan Lingtian was not fond of Yi Man's attitude, he was still slightly taken aback by his innate talent in the martial Dao. He glanced at Yi Man. A 29-year-old martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage was quite impressive. He recalled how there was no one younger than him who had the same cultivation base as him on Cloud Continent, let alone someone with a higher cultivation base. However, he had only arrived at the outskirts of the Dao Martial Saint Land, and he had already met 2 people who were younger than him with a higher cultivation base. This sent chills running up his spine. Duan Lingtian, I think you must not have any place to go since it's your first time coming to the Dao Martial Saint Land. Why don't you follow me back to Mount Hill City? Our Mount Hill City welcomes gifted martial cultivators like you the most. Lin Qingrong took the initiative to invite Duan Lingtian as he looked at him. Guo Li was taken aback for a moment when she heard Lin Qingrong extending an invitation to Duan Lingtian. There was no doubt that Lin Qingrong, a capable person under the command of the city governor of Mount Hill City, would not let go of Duan Lingtian, this genius martial cultivator. Duan Lingtian came from the mortal continent, and yet, he managed to kill more than 100 obsidian pangolins with his own strength. In her opinion, he must be also a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage like her. Although Duan Lingtian was older and was now 35 years old, he was still a native of the mortal continent after all. In the Dao Martial Saint Land, although people who were as gifted as her were not easily found, there was quite a number of them as well. However, someone like Duan Lingtian was extremely rare. At the very least, she had never heard of someone like him before. When Yi Man heard Lin Qingrong inviting Duan Lingtian, his face turned grave immediately. His eyes turned even colder when he looked at Duan Lingtian. Senior Lin, I can accept your invitation, but after 2 years, I'll need to make a trip back home. I wonder if I'll have this freedom once I've joined Mount Hill City. Duan Lingtian asked after he thought about it for a while. No matter what, he must return after 2 years. At that time, his 2 fiancées would be giving birth. Don't you worry about this. If you join our Mount Hill City, you can return to visit your family anytime you wish. However, you'll need to inform us first before you do. Although 2 years is still a long time to go, I'll approve your request now. Lin Qingrong smiled in response. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was far more valuable than Guo Li and Yi Man both added up together. Although Duan Lingtian was 35 years old and only at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage, the fact that he was from the mortal continent and possessed such a cultivation base meant that he was a genius among geniuses and a monster among monsters. Guo Li and Yi Man could not compare to him at all. It was apparent that Lin Qingrong thought Duan Lingtian was a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. After all, the battle ability Duan Lingtian had demonstrated earlier was just too astounding. It was not something a martial cultivator at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage was capable of. Thank you, Senior Lin. Duan Lingtian quickly expressed his gratitude. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. This was his first time going to the Dao Martial Saint Land, and he did indeed need a place to go. As for other matters, he would only think about it once he arrived at the Dao Martial Saint Land. Chapter 1363. Moreover, Senior Lin had saved his life earlier. No matter what, there was no reason for him to reject this person's invitation. Guo Li took the initiative to congratulate Duan Lingtian. After joining the city governor's estate in Mount Hill City, you'll have roots in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Your time here will be much more comfortable having someone to depend on. Thank you. Duan Lingtian thanked Guo Li immediately. HMPH. Yi Man scoffed in his deep voice. It was obvious he was unhappy Duan Lingtian was joining the city governor's estate in Mount Hill City too. Yi Man. Lin Qingrong looked at Yi Man at this moment. Senior Lin. Yi Man was humble when faced with Lin Qingrong. It was as though he was a completely different person. You should leave, Lin Qingrong said calmly. What? Clearly, Yi Man did not understand what Lin Qingrong meant. I'm asking you to return to Fuyu Island. My quota for recruiting martial cultivator and Dao cultivators on Fuyu Island this time is only limited to 2 people. Lin Qingrong made his intention very clear with his words. Only 2 people? Guo Li was shocked. It was obvious she had also just found out about this. Yi Man finally understood what Lin Qingrong was trying to say. What Lin Qingrong meant was obvious. He could only recruit 2 people, and he had initially recruited Yi Man and Guo Li. However, now that Duan Lingtian was joining them, Yi Man who was less powerful than Guo Li was no longer needed, and he should return home. Why? Yi Man's expression was terrible. He looked at Duan Lingtian furiously after glancing at Lin Qingrong and said in his deep voice, I'll concede to Guo Li since she's more powerful than me. But what's with this Duan Lingtian? Although his performance earlier wasn't too shabby, I can do whatever he did. Why does he deserve this more than me? Yi Man said with an unwilling and resentful expression on his face. What? You're thinking of competing with Duan Lingtian? Lin Qingrong asked as he narrowed his eyes. A hint of amusement flashed through his eyes. That's right. I won't yield unless he defeats me. Yi Man's began to raise his voice the more he spoke. Duan Lingtian, are you willing to fight him? If you are, you may do so, if you're not, just ignore him. I, Lin Qingrong, will decide who gets recruited, Lin Qingrong said as he looked at Duan Lingtian with a smile on his face. He could not stop smiling whenever he looked at Duan Lingtian. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was like a treasure that he had found. He was only 35 years old, and his cultivation base was at the intermediate mortal shedding stage even though he had just arrived at the Dao Martial Saint Land. Such a genius was on par with the favorite disciple of the city governor of Mount Hill City. Yi Man looked even more solemn after listening to Lin Qingrong's words. His words clearly indicated that whether Duan Lingtian accepted his challenge or not, he would still bring him to Mount Hill City. At this moment, he felt as though the raging fire in him was about to explode. Duan Lingtian, you're a coward if you don't accept my challenge. You're useless. You're trash. Yi Man shouted at Duan Lingtian as though he had gone insane from his anger. What a crazy dog. A cold gleam flashed through Duan Lingtian's eyes when Yi Man finished speaking. Since you've challenged me, naturally, there's no reason for me to reject you. Great. Fantastic. Yi Man stepped forward in the air excitedly and stood across Duan Lingtian when he heard him accepting his challenge. Duan Lingtian, I'll prove my ability to Senior Lin that you're below me. A saber appeared in Yi Man's hand suddenly. The crescent-shaped saber released waves of terrifying aura. Duan Lingtian thought it looked familiar. Royal Grade Spirit Weapon. No, it should be a human rank mediocre saint weapon. To be safe, Duan Lingtian brought out his sun-shooting bow immediately when he saw Yi Man had brought out his saint weapon. He was just a martial cultivator at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage after all, and Yi Man was a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Unfortunately, I don't have any arrows left. Duan Lingtian sighed inwardly when he recalled his last arrow had fallen into the ocean together with the wild beasts Ling Qingrong had killed. But even without arrows, it's enough for me to defeat this Yi Man, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Suddenly, a familiar voice entered Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian, Yi Man's a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage with 13 open saint veins. He'll have at least 40 open saint veins when he cultivates to the paramount mortal shedding stage. He has the potential to break through to the saint rudiment stage. 13 saint veins. At least 40 saint veins would be open. The potential to break through to the saint rudiment stage. Duan Lingtian almost laughed out loud when he heard Guo Li's true energy voice transmission. A martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage with only 13 open saint veins. One must know that Duan Lingtian already had 15 open saint veins even though he was only at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. However, the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage had a bigger chi. He was no match for Yi Man if they were to compare their true energy. As the No. 2 powerhouse among the younger generation in Dao Martial Saint Land's Fuyu Island, one could imagine the saint-grade martial tactic Yi Man had cultivated was most likely powerful. At least, it was more powerful than what Duan Lingtian was cultivating. After all, Duan Lingtian had only just begun to study saint-grade martial tactic 2 to 3 years ago. His confidence came from the sun-shooting bow in his hand as well as his powerful body. He managed to fight the obsidian pangolins without using his true energy, sun-shooting bow or saint-grade martial tactic earlier, that alone proved how powerful his body was. His current body was even more powerful than a 5-clawed divine dragon at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. I only need to attack once with my saber, and you'll be gone. Yi Man glared at Duan Lingtian with disdain and vanished from his spot as soon he finished speaking. It was as though he had turned into a gust of wind before he arrived in front of Duan Lingtian. He was just slightly slower than Duan Lingtian at his full speed. The intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage's true energy is really something. Duan Lingtian was secretly impressed when he saw Yi Man appeared before him. Yi Man's speed was just a little slower than Duan Lingtian when he used the body and arrow synchronization. Die! Yi Man shouted with a mocking expression on his face when he saw Duan Lingtian seem to be shocked by his appearance. It did not seem like he had any intention to dodge at all. He slashed the saber in his hand down immediately. A crescent-shaped ferocious ray that emitted a chilly aura appeared as soon as he slashed his saber. The saber's speed was much faster than Yi Man's speed. What a quick saber slash! Duan Lingtian was stunned by the saber's lightning speed. It must be a saint-grade martial tactics saber martial technique because it was impossible for a regular saber martial technique to be that fast. Duan Lingtian's face was tensed as he quickly placed his hand on the sun-shooting bow's bowstring. Duan Lingtian. Guo Li's expression changed drastically when she saw Duan Lingtian had no intention to dodge Yi Man's saber. Even she did not dare to underestimate Yi Man. On the other hand, Lin Qingrong watched as everything unfold as though he was not worried at all. In reality, he knew how powerful Duan Lingtian was when he had blinded the wild beast at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage earlier. Not only was he more powerful than Yi Man, but he was even more powerful than Guo Li. Therefore, he was not worried at all when Yi Man challenged Duan Lingtian. Whoosh! As a deafening and horrible noise was heard, a true energy light blade shot toward Yi Man's saber the second Duan Lingtian released the bowstring on the sun-shooting bow. Compared to the true energy on Yi Man's saber, the true energy light blade was insignificant. It did not look like a true energy at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. However, the insignificant true energy light blade was faster than the saber in Yi Man's hand. The energy contained in it seemed to be very powerful as well because it shot Yi Man's saber away when they collided. Not only that, even Yi Man was sent flying. He only regained his footing after he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. "Gentlemen, you lose," Duan Lingtian said calmly with a cold look in his eyes. His words caused Yi Man to spit out another mouthful of blood from anger. He would be glad if Duan Lingtian had lost and said, "Gentlemen, you win." To him, the thing was he lost. He was a loser. "Let's go," Lin Qingrong said to Duan Lingtian and Guo Li. He did not even spare a glance for Yi Man as he took the lead to step forward and fly away. Duan Lingtian looked at Yi Man with ridicule in his eyes before he went after Lin Qingrong. "Yi Man, please return. The city governor's estate in Mount Hill City recruits people once every 5 years. You're still young, and you still have a chance," Guo Li advised Yi Man since they knew each other prior to this. However, Yi Man seemed as though he did not hear her words as he stood in his spot looking a little lost as he watched Duan Lingtian leave. It seemed as though he was still living in the shadow of defeat. Guo Li sighed when she saw Yi Man's behavior and went after Duan Lingtian and Lin Qingrong. "Duan Lingtian, I won't let you go, I'll never let you go." Yi Man finally regained his senses after Duan Lingtian and the other two had flown quite a distance away. His eyes were similar to a venomous snake. It was cold and ferocious. "Mount Hill City, Lin Qingrong, I'll make all of you regret this. I'll definitely make all of you regret this." No matter how Yi Man screamed, Duan Lingtian and the other two did not see it. "Duan Lingtian, it seemed like you didn't use much true energy when you fought with Yi Man," Lin Qingrong said to Duan Lingtian while they were traveling. "I've tried my best," Duan Lingtian forced a smile. At this moment, he realized Lin Qingrong might have mistaken him for a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. For a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage martial, the insignificant true energy he had released earlier made it seem like he was holding back. The thing was, he was only a martial cultivator at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. His chi-si was only as big as a pigeon's egg. It was said that the chi-si of a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage was as big as a chicken's egg. The amount of true energy was different for martial cultivators at different stages. How could he compare? Moreover, the true energy in his pigeon's egg-sized chi-si was not full yet. However, the day it was full would be the day he had broken through to the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. "You've tried your best." Lin Qingrong shook his head when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. He thought he was just being humble. Chapter 1364. During the journey, Duan Lingtian learned a little more about Mount Hill City. Mount Hill City was a big city located close to the ocean on the west of Dao Martial Saint Land that was ruled by a powerful sect. The areas at the border of the city were also ruled by them. Fuyu Town in Fuyu Island, Guo Li's hometown, was one of the areas. "Duan Lingtian, is the mortal continent fun?" Guo Li excitedly asked Duan Lingtian multiple questions about the mortal continent. Now that she learned Duan Lingtian was the strongest in the mortal continent, she was keen to learn more about it. "The mortal continent's so much more fun compared to our Dao Martial Saint Land. I, for instance, have never left the border of Mount Hill City even though I'm already an adult," Guo Li said sadly. The Dao Martial Saint Land was a place filled with powerhouses. There were countless people at the mortal shedding stage, and the number of people at the Saint Rudiment stage was as many as dogs. Therefore, people at the mortal shedding stage did not dare to travel as they pleased. If they were unfortunate, they might be killed. Both are good in their own ways. I suppose, Duan Lingtian said while smiling. I, for instance, have never seen someone who's younger than me that has the same ability as me on Cloud Continent. You're only 27, and you're already a martial cultivator at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Something like that is unimaginable on Cloud Continent. That's because we have different cultivation environment. I heard there are no Saint Stones reserves in the mortal continent. Guo Li asked. That's right. Duan Lingtian nodded. That's why, do you know, in our Fuyu town alone, we have 3 Saint Stones reserves. Our Guo clan owns one of them, the Yi clan where Yi Man is from owns another one, and another clan owns the third one. Guo Li said, the 3 clans in our Fuyu town are just 9th-rate forces. 9th-rate forces? Duan Lingtian was speechless when he heard that. Such inferior forces own Saint Stones reserves. Nobody came after your clan's Saint Stones reserve? Duan Lingtian asked. There's nothing to come after. The 3 Saint Stones reserves in our Fuyu town are just 9th-grade Saint Stone reserves. They usually only produce 9th-grade Saint Stones. There might be 8th-grade Saint Stones occasionally if we're lucky, Guo Li said. Duan Lingtian had heard of the different grades for Saint Stone from Shui Nai previously. There was a total of 9 grades for Saint Stones. 9th grade was the lowest, and naturally, 1st grade was the highest grade. A 1st grade Saint Stone was equivalent to 10 2nd grade Saint Stones, 103rd grade Saint Stones or 1000 4th grade Saint Stones. The 9th grade Saint Stones were the lowest of them all. The Saint Stones produced in the Supreme Grade Origin Stones reserves in the 2 ancient clans on Cloud Continent and the 4 overseas Saint Islands were just 9th grade Saint Stones. However, the Saint Stones Shui Nai had given him were of a higher grade. Gradually, Duan Lingtian learned about the situation on the Dao Martial Saint Land from Guo Li. Forces without any paramount mortal shedding stage guardians in the Dao Martial Saint Land were unrated forces. The 3 clans in Fuyu town where Guo Li was from had paramount mortal shedding stage guardians respectively. However, since there were no guardians at the Saint Rudiment stage in the clans, they were only a 9th-rate force. There has never been a Saint Rudiment powerhouse in the 3 clans. Duan Lingtian asked skeptically. Hardly, Guo Li said, don't judge it just because Yi Man and I look as though we have the potential to break through to the Saint Rudiment stage. It's still uncertain if we can successfully break through to the Saint Rudiment stage. Other matters aside, all 3 clans in Fuyu town don't allow the existence of Saint Rudiment stage powerhouses in the clans. I'm only 27, but the other 2 clans have attempted to murder me for at least 100 times, Guo Li said as she sighed, looking a little jaded. The same goes for Yi Man as well. Therefore, when I found out there's a chance for me to join the city governor's estate in Mound Hill City, both Yi Man and I couldn't wait to join. Unfortunately, Duan Lingtian knew Guo Li felt bad for Yi Man even though she did not finish her sentence. In certain aspects, Guo Li and Yi Man were in a similar situation after all. Now that you've joined Mound Hill City, you should be able to successfully break through to the Saint Rudiment stage, Duan Lingtian said with a smile. However, Guo Li shook her head. There are many talented people who have the potential to break through to the Saint Rudiment stage in the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, it's already considered not bad if 1 out of 10 of them manage to successfully break through to the Saint Rudiment stage. Let's not talk about those with the potential to break through to the Saint Rudiment stage. Just the journey to break through to the Saint Rudiment stage is filled with difficulties. The risk alone is enough to kill them, Guo Li said sympathetically. Duan Lingtian's heart sank when he heard this. At this moment, he realized how cruel the Dao Martial Saint Land was. To be able to survive in the Dao Martial Saint Land, you'll need tough fists, Lin Qingrong said to Duan Lingtian at this moment. People with tough fists ruled. Just like the saying, the weak are the prey of the strong, and survival of the fittest, it applied in the Dao Martial Saint Land even more than the mortal continents. Elder Huo, do you have any spiritual secret tactic to detect people's age? At this moment, Duan Lingtian recalled the time when Yi Man had probed his age. He could not help but ask Elder Huo in the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. In his opinion, Elder Huo must have such a secret tactic since he had lived for so many years. Spiritual secret tactic for detecting people's age is just child's play. If you want to learn, I'll send you a high-level secret tactic now. This secret tactic will let you detect someone's age without alerting them as long as their cultivation base is not higher than yours, Elder Huo said. A secret tactic to detect someone's age without alerting the other person as long as his or her cultivation base isn't higher than mine. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up when he heard Elder Huo's words. He seemed excited. Elder Huo, send it to me right now. This secret tactic I'm sending you is called Divine Eye. Its power will rise when the saint veins connected to your eyes are opened in the future. Elder Huo imparted a great deal of knowledge about Divine Eye when he spoke. Divine Eye was a type of assistive secret tactic. Its main function was to detect people's cultivation base and age. It was easy to master this technique as long as one was able to release one's spiritual energy. After merely half an hour, Duan Lingtian had mastered Divine Eye completely. Naturally, he wanted to put it to the test now that he had mastered it. His first target was Guo Li. Duan Lingtian squinted as he looked at Guo Li. Spiritual energy came out from his eyes silently and lingered around Guo Li quickly without touching her. At this very moment, his eyes gleamed when he discovered there were lines on Guo Li's body. Elder Huo, why are there lines on her body? Duan Lingtian asked skeptically. There are growth rings in trees, the same applies to human, what you're looking at right now are the growth rings for humans, Elder Huo responded. Human growth rings. Duan Lingtian began to count the growth rings on Guo Li's body when he heard that. Soon after, he discovered there were 27 rings on her body, she was indeed 27 years old. That's amazing, Duan Lingtian could not help but exclaim inwardly. Guo Li was unaware of his action from the beginning until the end. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian probed Guo Li's cultivation base. The second-level mortal shedding stage. I wonder if Senior Lin's at the Saint Rudiment stage. If he is, he'll definitely find out if I try to probe him. Duan Lingtian glanced at Lin Qingrong as he struggled with his indecision. Ah, I don't care. Eventually, Duan Lingtian began to probe Lin Qingrong since he could not curb his curiosity. He began by probing Lin Qingrong's cultivation base. The paramount stage of the mortal shedding stage. Duan Lingtian was relieved when he discovered Lin Qingrong's cultivation base. He was lucky Lin Qingrong was not at the Saint Rudiment stage, otherwise, his action would have been found out. Senior Lin's age. Subsequently, he began to check Lin Qingrong's age. There's a total of 58 circles, Senior Lin's 58 years old this year. Soon after, Duan Lingtian discovered Lin Qingrong's age as well. The Dao Martial Saint land is just in front of us, Lin Qingrong suddenly said to them. Duan Lingtian looked ahead after hearing that. He saw a vast land behind the sea in the distance. That's the Dao Martial Saint land. Duan Lingtian felt a little emotional when he realized he was going to step on the Dao Martial Saint land soon. It'll only take half an hour to get to Mount Hill City after arriving at the Dao Martial Saint land, Lin Qingrong continued to say. Duan Lingtian nodded. Soon after, the three of them arrived at the Dao Martial Saint land. The vast land was located close to the ocean. It was rich with lush greeneries, and the air was fresh. A tiny, black dot appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes after half an hour. That's Mount Hill City ahead of us. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he heard Guo Li's words. Meanwhile, the black dot in the distance did not stop growing in size. Soon after, the black dot transformed into a huge and majestic city. The city was extremely big. At least it seemed big to Duan Lingtian, who had never seen such a big city on Cloud Continent before. Mount Hill City. From afar, Mount Hill City seemed like a gigantic beast with its monstrous mouth opened. It looked as though the city was swallowing carriages and humans. It emitted an oppressive aura from afar. Why's no one flying into the city? Duan Lingtian noticed something soon after. There's a flight prohibiting formation covering the entire city above Mount Hill City. It's a formation set up by a powerful Dao cultivator. When the formation's activated, martial cultivators and Dao cultivators below the Saint Rudiment stage won't be able to fly within the city, Lin Qingrong explained to Duan Lingtian patiently after hearing his question. I see. Duan Lingtian discovered something new again. Soon after, the three of them arrived outside of Mount Hill City. Just when Duan Lingtian was about to walk into the city, he saw Lin Qingrong lifting his hand and bringing out a carriage. The four-wheeled carriage was similar to the ones Duan Lingtian saw entering the city. Chapter 1365. However, the carriage Lin Qingrong brought out was even more luxurious. Get in. Lin Qingrong took the lead and entered the carriage after inviting Duan Lingtian and Guo Li in. Guo Li did not seem surprised and entered the carriage. Duan Lingtian was the last one to enter the carriage. When he entered the carriage, he realized it was like two combined horse carriages in there. The only thing missing was the horse. When Duan Lingtian was wondering how the carriage operated, Lin Qingrong's voice sounded, "Sit tight." The carriage began to move as soon as he spoke. Duan Lingtian noticed the wooden table where Lin Qingrong placed his hand on was sparkling. It seemed like he was controlling the carriage with his true energy. So this is what someone at the paramount mortal shedding stage is capable of. I can't believe true energy can be used like this. Duan Lingtian was inwardly impressed when he saw this. During the journey, Duan Lingtian watched the bustling streets filled with carriages through the window. Out of boredom, he performed divine eye and casually looked outside. Apart from the people in the carriages, he probed every single person on the road. Soon after, he noticed most of the people in the city were at the mortal stage. There were not many people at the mortal shedding stage. The most powerful one was merely at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. On the other hand, the buildings and city model in Mount Hill City was vastly superior to the cities on Cloud Continent. It was an eye-opening experience for Duan Lingtian. He was really glad he came here. During the journey, the pedestrian would make way for the carriage Duan Lingtian was riding in and looked at it respectfully whenever they passed through crowded places. It was as though they knew the people in the carriage were extraordinary. As they traveled deep into Mount Hill City, the luxurious carriage Lin Qinrong controlled finally came to a stop before a huge and luxurious estate. Could this be the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City? Duan Lingtian speculated. The estate's entrance alone could accommodate a few of the carriages he was riding in. It was massive. What surprised Duan Lingtian even more was the armored guards standing in front of the estate entrance. He discovered they were all at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage through divine eye. The intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage, they're just guards standing at the estate entrance. This has to be the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. Duan Lingtian was certain about this. Although he had seen everything on Cloud Continent, he felt like a country bumpkin here. Anyone at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage could rule the entire Cloud Continent and the 4 great overseas saint lands, however, they were just entrance guards here. My current cultivation base is even lower than an entrance guard. Duan Lingtian mocked himself inwardly. This is our city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. The city governor estate is the place with the most power in the entire Mount Hill City, Lin Qinrong said as he looked at both of them in the carriage. I'll put both of you in the latent dragon camp after we enter. That's where we train geniuses in the city governor estate. Latent dragon camp. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li's eyes lit up in unison when they heard that. Soon after, Lin Qinrong continued to control the 4-wheel carriage and enter the city governor's estate. When their carriage passed through the entrance, the guards at the door bowed at them. It was obvious they recognized Lin Qingrong's carriage. After entering the city governor's estate, Duan Lingtian discovered it was mind-blowingly big. It was even bigger than the palaces on Cloud Continent. When they entered the estate, Duan Lingtian did not stop using divine eye. He discovered the people passing by were above the mortal shedding stage. He even saw some people at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. Soon after, Lin Qingrong stopped the carriage and invited Duan Lingtian and Guo Li to alight from the carriage. Subsequently, he brought Duan Lingtian and Guo Li and walked into a bamboo grove ahead. When they entered the bamboo grove, they walked on a limestone path made for pedestrians. There was no one around at this moment. As they walked on the path, Lin Qingrong led Duan Lingtian and Guo Li into a huge compound deep in Mount Hill Estate. Before they walked into the compound, Duan Lingtian and Guo Li could not help but cover their noses. This was because they smelled a disgusting stench wafting out from inside. It was clearly the stench of urine. Where the hell is this place? Duan Lingtian and Guo Li looked at each other and realized something was wrong. This place seemed to be the end of the city governor's estate. Could the latent dragon camp be in there? They did not dare to think any further when they thought about this. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li frowned at the stench of urine as they followed Lin Qingrong into the compound. It was a barren land with potholes all over the compound. It was a little absurd that such a place existed in the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. It was like a completely different world in here. Upon closer inspection, Duan Lingtian noticed there were dilapidated cottages built on this barren land. They looked as though they were about to collapse at any given time. Meanwhile, there was a high platform behind these cottages. There were also 13 cottages built on the high platform. However, the 13 cottages were brand new, and one could tell it was nice in there. Most importantly, Duan Lingtian discovered the source of the stench. There was a long and narrow manure pit below the high platform. It was filled with feces, and it was enough to make someone throw up. Duan Lingtian was able to endure and adapt to the horrible environment quickly since he used to be in the special force and was a mercenary in his past life. However, it was a different story for Guo Li. She was so disgusted that she began to throw up. This is the latent dragon camp in the city governor's estate. Master City Governor built it himself previously. This is where we train geniuses, this is where both of you are going to stay, Lin Qingrong said. He did not seem to notice Guo Li's reaction. Duan Lingtian forced a smile on his face while Guo Li's expression changed drastically, and she threw up even more. Latent Dragon Camp. This was the hellish place she was going to be staying at. At this very moment, Guo Li thought about backing out, however, she dismissed that thought when she recalled she might be assassinated if she gave up on this opportunity and returned to Fuyu Town. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian was still looking around. He noticed that apart from the dilapidated cottages on the barren land filled with potholes and the brand new cottages on top of the high platform, there was a tall loft at the side of the platform as well. Haha, Qingrong, you're back. Duan Lingtian saw an old man walking out from the other side after he heard a hearty laugh. Two young men followed behind him. The two young men frowned and covered their noses with their hands. It was obvious they were disgusted by the environment as well. Elder Lu, Lin Qingrong greeted the old man as soon as they met. It seemed like they were close. Oh, are these the geniuses you brought back from Fuyu Town? The old man asked with a smile as he looked at Duan Lingtian and Guo Li. The old man appeared indifferent, but the way he looked at Duan Lingtian made him feel uneasy. Duan Lingtian could not help but use divine eye on him. Duan Lingtian discovered this old man was just like Lin Qingrong. He was also at the paramount stage of the mortal shedding stage. He was the second person at the paramount stage of the mortal shedding stage that Duan Lingtian saw since his arrival at the Dao Martial Saint Land. This person's strength was on par with Lin Qingrong. Guo Lin, this city governor's estate of Mount Hill City, what rate is it? Duan Lingtian could not help but ask Guo Li through true energy voice transmission. At this moment, Guo Li was feeling a little better, and she replied through true energy voice transmission after hearing Duan Lingtian's question. The city governor's estate of Mount Hill City is an 8th-rate force in the Dao Martial Saint Land. There's usually a Saint Rudiment stage powerhouse guarding an 8th-rate force, just like the master governor of the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. He's at the Saint Rudiment stage. Senior Lin's at the paramount stage of the mortal shedding stage, Guo Li said. Also, the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City owns an 8th-grade Saint Stones reserve. Her name's Guo Li. She's a genius I brought from the Guo clan of Fuyu Town. Don't judge her just because she's a lady. She's number one among the younger generation in Fuyu Town. Lin Qingrong introduced Guo Li to the old man. He looked at Duan Lingtian, and his smile turned even wider. On the other hand, I met him during our journey. His name's Duan Lingtian. He comes from Mortal Continent. Mortal Continent. The old man was stunned when he heard Lin Qingrong's words. Even the two young men behind him were looking at Duan Lingtian now. Judging by the quality of the people you selected and the fact that he came from Mortal Continent, I suppose he's quite outstanding. Seems like you'll receive a hefty reward from Master City Governor this time, the old man said enviously. Subsequently, he began to introduce the two young men behind him. He introduced the young man in blue first. His name's Hu Jia. He's a genius I found in Storm Town. He's 28 years old this year, and his cultivation base is at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. This one's called Zhu Lang. He's also a genius from Storm Town. He's 29 years old this year, and his cultivation base is also at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. The old man then looked at the other young man in green. The old man looked proud when he introduced the two young men. He did not only announce their age but also their cultivation base. They were both below 30 years old, but they were already at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Such geniuses were the best of the best even in the border areas of Mount Hill City. The young men, Hu Jia and Zhu Lang, who were frowning and covering their noses initially removed their hands from their noses when they noticed Guo Li had done so. Although they still found the place disgusting and had thought about backing out, they decided to endure. They did not want to embarrass themselves before a beauty like Guo Li. Chapter 1366. I'll leave both of you here, the old man said solemnly as he glanced at Hu Jia and Zhu Lang. Cultivate diligently at the latent dragon camp. You'll benefit greatly if you become one of the 13 gangsters. Qingrong, shall we? As they wondered what the 13 gangsters were, The old man looked at Lin Qingrong, and the solemnity on his face was replaced with a smile. Lin Qingrong nodded at the old man before he looked at Duan Lingtian and Guo Li solemnly. Duan Lingtian, Guo Li, the words Elder Lu said are similar to what I want to say to both of you. Do well and fight to become one of the 13 gangsters. As soon as Lin Qingrong finished speaking, he left with the old man after they looked at the loft at the side of the high platform. He did not even wait for Duan Lingtian and Guo Li to respond. It was easy come and easy go for them. No matter if it were Guo Li, Hu Jia or Zhu Lang, 3 of them frowned again with a dark expression on their faces after Lin Qingrong and the old man left. This was because it was just too foul-smelling here. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian was the only one who looked calm. It seemed as though he had already adapted to the foul-smelling environment. Hi, it's Duan Lingtian, right? Don't you think it's really stinky here? Zhu Lang's personality was similar to his name that meant, wave. He was sociable and took the initiative to greet Duan Lingtian. So what if it's stinky? Don't we have to stay here no matter what? Duan Lingtian shook his head and walked toward the latent dragon camp alone. He was walking toward the dilapidated cottages in the barren land, that was where the manure pit was closest to. The stench there was even more horrible and unbearable, causing people to stop moving forward. Guo Li clenched her teeth and went after Duan Lingtian. Hu Jia and Zhu Lang looked at each other and saw a hint of helplessness in each other's eyes. They also went after them subsequently. Soon after, the 4 of them arrived at the area with the dilapidated cottages. They saw many young people similar to them there. Those young people looked as young as they were. Duan Lingtian discovered their age to be between 28 years old and 30 years old through divine eye. There were some who were above 30 years of age. The oldest one was only 37 years old. Seems like I can be considered as elderly in this latent dragon camp, Duan Lingtian mocked himself inwardly. Although he knew he was one of the oldest here because he came from mortal continent, he felt uneasy. It was a subconscious feeling. The early stage of the mortal shedding stage at only 21 years old. Duan Lingtian discovered the youngest among them was at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage just like him. As for the others, the weakest one was at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage while some of them were at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. He did not see anyone at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage at all. So these are the geniuses of Dao Martial Saint Land. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. The 21-year-old at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage really shocked him. He recalled when he was 21 years old, it seemed like he was still at Darken Dynasty. His cultivation base was not worth mentioning at all. It could not compare to the 21-year-old at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. Dao Martial Saint Land's cultivation environment is insane, Duan Lingtian could not help but exclaim inwardly. Meanwhile, these young people were scattered around the dilapidated cottages. It appeared as though they had already adapted to the environment here. There are more newcomers. There were both men and women among this group of young people, and they looked at Duan Lingtian and the other 3 in an amused manner when they walked in. Naturally, most of them had their eyes on Guo Li, Hu Jia, and Zhu Lang who were currently frowning, especially Guo Li. Many eyes were looking at her desirously. After all, she was a natural and elegant beauty. It was natural that she stood among all the ladies here. Therefore, she was at the center of attention. What a beauty, many of them softly exclaimed as their eyes shone. Many of them also walked out of the dilapidated cottages and stared at her unabashedly. They were staring at her like a male wolf in heat. It caused Guo Li to feel uneasy. Duan Lingtian slowed down so she could walk behind him because he seemed to have noticed her unease. He blocked their sight with his body. Thank you, Guo Li thanked Duan Lingtian softly when she noticed his intention. Hu Jia and Zhu Lang who were walking at the side noticed that Duan Lingtian's simple gesture had earned himself the beauty's gratitude. They exchanged a glance before copying him. They quickened their footsteps and walked shoulder to shoulder with him. Currently, the 3 of them blocked all the eyes that were looking at Guo Li. At this moment, the look from the staring eyes changed from desirous to resentful. It seemed as though they wanted to beat up Duan Lingtian and the other 2. HMPH. Such a shame that these geniuses come from Mount Hill City's border, don't they have any virtue? Hu Jia said with disdain after he scoffed softly. Everyone who came to the latent dragon camp wanted to change their fate. In the border areas of Mount Hill City, they could either depend on 9th-rate forces or unrated forces. If they did not pass the challenges in the city governor's estate, they would never be successful in life. They might even be killed one day in the future. The master city governor of the city governor's estate of Mound Hill City was keen about cultivating talents. Apart from adding new blood to the city governor's estate, the founding of Latent Dragon Camp also set a bright path for many. They could change their fate here, and they might be able to raise their status. Do we really have to stay here? Hujia's expression darkened when they were approaching the dilapidated cottages. However, he knew there was no way he could escape from staying here after seeing the young people walking out of the dilapidated cottages. Guo Li and Zhu Lang's expression did not look too good as well. All of the cottages out here are taken. We can only choose from the cottages near the manure pit. Duan Lingtian discovered something soon after. Those who arrived earlier than them occupied the cottages near the entrance. Although the environment was the same, the stench was not as strong there. Shit, there are no more cottages outside. Zhu Lang could not help but curse when he noticed this. If you want to take the cottages outside, you'll have to defeat the people who had taken them first. You'll have to get rid of them to conquer their lair, a young man said. It appeared he had heard Zhu Lang's words. We can do that. Duan Lingtian and the other three were stunned. We can fight in this Latent Dragon Camp. Fighting isn't prohibited in the Latent Dragon Camp. You won't be punished as long as you don't kill or cripple someone explained when they noticed the dubious expression on their faces. Is that so? Duan Lingtian mumbled softly before Guo Li and the other two regained their senses. He walked toward the cottage near the entrance on his own accord and looked at the occupant of the cottage. 23 years old, early stage of the mortal shedding stage. That was the cottage occupant's cultivation base. Although he was only at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage, the fact that he was able to stay in the cottage near the entrance proved that he was powerful. He had a slight smile on his face when he saw Duan Lingtian approaching him. What, you're here to fight for my cottage? I'll try. Duan Lingtian nodded. Subsequently, the young man at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage attacked Duan Lingtian as everyone watched on. Although he did not hold back when he came at Duan Lingtian, the young man was defeated with just a blow from him. The intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. The young man gasped when he was defeated. He did not say much. After glancing at Duan Lingtian, he went into the cottage close to the manure pit. He would only stand a chance of challenging the occupant of the cottage after he had healed himself. Duan Lingtian, you did great. Zhu Lang could not help but give Duan Lingtian a thumbs up when he saw how quickly he took over the cottage. At the same time, he looked around and discovered the occupants from the other cottages were standing near the entrance. Fight. Zhu Lang was very fortunate. The young man he fought was also at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage. He defeated that person with 2 to 3 hits and took over the cottage close to the entrance. Hujia, let's see what you got. After his victory, Zhu Lang looked at Hujia with a smile. The both of them came from Storm Town, and they had always competed with each other. It was only natural that they would compete with each other now. HMPH. Hujia scoffed softly and found himself an opponent. His opponent was also a young man at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. They were well matched in the beginning, but he was defeated later. How dare you attempt to take my cottage with this pathetic ability of yours? You must be looking of death. The young man who defeated Hujia glared at him fiercely. If we're not in the Latent Dragon Camp, I'll definitely cripple you even if I don't kill you, get lost. Hujia's expression was terrible. However, he could only suppress his embarrassment and back off since he was no match for that person. What, do you want my cottage too, beautiful? The young man who defeated Hujia soon noticed Guo Li was looking at him. He had a lecherous look on his face. I'll give you my cottage and look for another one if you spend the night with me, what do you think? The young man's words were shameless. Guo Li's face seemed to have been covered with a layer of frost when she heard his words. Even Duan Lingtian could not help but frown. There were people of such quality in the Latent Dragon Camp as well. Whoosh! Guo Li charged out as the judgmental eyes stared at her one after another. She was charging toward the young man who had defeated Hujia. She responded to his question with her action. Guo Li accelerated her speed. The young man's face turned solemn when she arrived before him. He realized the beauty he had verbally teased earlier seemed to be even more powerful than Hujia. The young man did not underestimate her and attacked first when she was close to him. However, he soon discovered his ability was lacking compared to her. Guo Li defeated him in within 3 hits. Perhaps all women were petty. Guo Li stepped on the young man's chest after defeating him and said coldly, "That's all you got." The young man looked wretched. He only felt embarrassed at this moment. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about it. Who was to blame for the fact that he was no match for Guo Li? So powerful, Guo Li's ability stunned many of them. Chapter 1367. Many young people, including Hu Jia and Zhu Lang, looked at Guo Li differently now. They no longer dared to underestimate her and treat her as just a lady. Duan Lingtian, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. Guo Li was only 27 years old. She became the #1 powerhouse among the younger generation in Fuyu Town even though she was a lady. She even defeated Yi Man who was at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage like her. One could tell her ability was extraordinary. Hu Jia was about to look for his next target when his expression changed slightly. He had noticed the young man under Guo Li's foot had stood up and was staring at him resentfully. It was obvious he thought Hu Jia and Guo Li were partners. Her earlier action had been taken as her standing up for him. At this moment, Hu Jia decided to temporarily give up on fighting for a cottage near the entrance. He covered his nose and went into a cottage near the manure pit. Although it was foul-smelling, he decided to endure it for now. When Duan Lingtian was about to walk into his cottage, a young man smirked and said to Guo Li who was also walking into her cottage, "What a heroine. You're strong, beautiful, why don't you try challenging the 13 gangsters? You can take over the cottage they occupy as long as you're able to defeat one of the 13 gangsters." The young man pointed at the high platform behind the manure pit as he spoke. There were 13 brand new cottages on top of it. You won't smell anything if you live up there. There's a mini wind attribute formation at the side of the high platform that blows the stench from the manure pit to us. The young man continued to persuade her. Moreover, if you're one of the 13 gangsters, you'll be rewarded with 108th grade saint stones each month even if you rank last. On the other hand, we're only given 10 8th grade saint stones each month. 13 gangsters. After hearing the young man's words, not only Guo Li, even Duan Lingtian, Hu Jia, and Zhu Lang looked at the brand new cottages on the high platform. That's where the 13 gangsters Senior Lin mentioned are staying. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. At this moment, Guo Li and the others regained their senses as well. What the hell, we only get 10 8th grade saint stones every month while they get at least 100 8th grade saint stones each month, that's not fair, that's not fair. Zhu Lang cried out. What are the 13 gangsters, cultivation base like? Guo Li's eyes lit up. She was interested in becoming one of the 13 gangsters. However, she remained calm and did not impulsively rush there. Apart from those ranked in the top 5 who are at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage, the rest are at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Many of them fought to answer Guo Li's question. The 13 cottages on the high platform, the 13 gangsters, ranking is arranged by sequence from left to right. The person staying at the cottage on the far left is the #1 among the 13 gangsters. Meanwhile, the one staying at the far right is the weakest one among the 13 people, many of them explained while more of them were watching unblinkingly. They were waiting to see what was going to happen since they enjoyed chaos. There are signs on them. Duan Lingtian who was observant noticed there were signs carved on the 13 cottages on the high platform. It was 1 to 13 from left to right. The top 13 gangsters stand a chance of meeting the master city governor to learn from him, someone added. I, Zhu Lang, will get myself a spot in the 13 gangsters. Zhu Lang shouted. Due to the flight prohibiting formation in the city, he could only run to the side of the manure pit and hop on the high platform where the 13 gangsters resided with his strength. Haha, this is going to be a great show. I wonder if he'll make the 13 gangsters bleed. I don't think so. Let's not talk about the 13 gangsters at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. Even those ranked in the last 8 at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage are remarkable among people at the mortal shedding stage. That's right, otherwise, they wouldn't be one of the 13 gangsters. Many of them had an anticipatory expression on their faces as they looked at the high platform. He only just arrived at the latent dragon camp, and he's already challenging the 13 gangsters. At this moment, more young men and women walked out of the dilapidated cottages one after another. Zhu Lang's words had caught their attention. They were all looking at the high platform with an amused expression when they walked out of the cottage. Duan Lingtian raised his eyebrows and easily discovered with his divine eye that these people were also at the early stage and intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. This was not surprising since they would be one of the 13 gangsters if they were at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. They would not be staying here, smelling the stench from the manure pit. Apart from receiving 108th grade saint stones every month, the 13 gangsters, residents did not reek of the manure pit. It was clear they had special privileges. Why would those who were slightly more powerful not want to be one of the 13 gangsters? Naturally, this excluded those sadistic ones who enjoyed the stench coming from below. Duan Lingtian was not sadistic. Therefore, he decided to challenge the 13 gangster to become one of them. Soon after, Zhu Lang arrived at the last cottage. Perhaps Zhu Lang was a little impulsive due to his rage earlier, but he had calmed down after arriving on the high platform. He chose to fight the weakest one among the 13 gangsters, the occupant of cottage number 13. The closer the cottage was to the front, the better the privileges. The difference in ability between them was quite big. Those who ranked in the top 5 were geniuses at the mastery mortal shedding stage. Although the others who ranked from 6 to 13 were just at the intermediate mortal shedding stage, there were differences in their abilities. The occupant of cottage number 13 cottage was undoubtedly the weakest of them all. However, like the saying went, a lean camel is still bigger than a horse. Number 13 was only the weakest compared to the other 12, but not when compared to everyone else. The air is so much fresher here, Zhu Lang said as he indulged himself and took a deep breath while he stood in front of cottage no. 13. There was no foul stench here. It was like a completely different world up here compared to the cottages below the high platform. Soon after, Zhu Lang yelled at cottage number 13, "Hey! The fellow staying in number 13, come out right now, Master Zhu, wants your kennel." Kennel. The group of people, including Duan Lingtian and Guo Li, stared at him with an odd manner when they heard his words. This fellow called cottage number 13 a kennel. Would that not mean he was fighting for a kennel? Ha ha ha, who dares to challenge me, Hu Lin? When Zhu Lang finished speaking, a burst of laughter came from inside the cottage. The laugh was maniacal and unscrupulous. One could tell the person was arrogant from his laugh. At this moment, the door swung open, and a tall, big, and terrifying young man walked out. He stood there like a tower, inspiring fear in people when they looked at him. The young man was close to 2 meters tall. He was number 13 among the 13 gangsters in Latent Dragon Camp. With his cultivation base at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage, he was one of the best among the camp's martial cultivators and Dao cultivators at the same level. At this moment, he was glaring at Zhu Lang with his big and ferocious eyes. "So, Shorty, you're challenging me, Hu Lin?" "Shorty." Duan Lingtian's lip twitched involuntarily when he heard Hu Lin's words. No matter what, Zhu Lang was still 1.7 meters tall, but Hu Lin had called him Shorty. It was only natural since Zhu Lang was a little short compared to Hu Lin's 2 meters in height. "We'll see how a big guy like you is going to defeat me, the Shorty." Zhu Lang's face turned solemn, and his eyes turned red when he heard Hu Lin's mocking words. He stomped his feet, and his body began to spin. It was as though a tornado had descended on the place. What a powerful movement technique! Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up. The movement technique Zhu Lang was currently performing was even a few times faster than Yi Man from the Yi clan of Fuyu Town. Naturally, Zhu Lang was still slower than Duan Lingtian. "Your speed's pretty good, but you won't be able to defeat me with just your speed." Hu Lin's face turned ferocious when faced with Zhu Lang, who was charging at him like a tornado. He flexed the muscles on his body, causing his clothes to tighten. If not for his loose clothes, it would have been torn from his flexing. Whoosh, 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 As Zhu Lang got closer to Hu Lin, a sword appeared in his hand out of thin air. He swung his sword in an arc smoothly, making it appear like a flowing dragon. It was majestic. He seemed to be drawing an arc in the air every time he swung his sword. Zhu Lang's sword is faster than Yi Man. In fact, his combined ability is much more powerful than Yi Man. When Duan Lingtian witnessed this, he could not help but think of Yi Man, the martial cultivator at the intermediate mortal shedding stage, whom he had fought with previously. It was the first time he had fought a martial cultivator at the mortal shedding stage since he arrived at the Dao Martial Saint Land. Although Yi Man's ability was great, he was still no match for Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian had defeated him in just one blow. As Zhu Lang's tornado-like body swung the sword in arcs, Hu Lu turned solemn as an iron staff appeared in his hand. Naturally, it was not an ordinary iron staff. It was a human rank mediocre saint weapon. Ha! At this moment, Hu Lin shouted and shook the iron staff in his hand. The iron staff began to spin rapidly before his body like a windmill. Is this an attack technique or a defensive technique? Duan Lingtian was stunned when he saw Hu Ling handling the iron staff deftly, causing the air to tremble around him. Perhaps due to the strong gravity at the Dao Martial Saint Land, Duan Lingtian noticed the technique Hu Lin had cast only created rumbling airwaves here. It would have caused a chaotic shockwave if he were to cast this technique on Cloud Continent. Right at this moment, Zhu Lang arrived before Hu Lin and swung his sword at him. Clang, 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 comma. As the sound of weapon colliding reverberated in the air, Zhu Lang's body began to shudder. Eventually, the hand that was holding the sword shook, and fresh blood flowed from his torn curlicue. At the same time, the sword in his hand was hit by the iron staff in Hu Lin's hand and fell to the ground with a loud clang. In the next second, the iron staff in Hu Lin's hand decelerated its speed, and he stepped forward to kick Zhu Lang, who had yet to stand up properly. Chapter 1368. Zhu Lang was kicked away, forming a perfect curve in the sky before he fell down in the direction of the manure pit. The onlookers were all stunned when they saw this. They suspected Hu Lin had done it intentionally. When everyone, including Hu Lin, thought Zhu Lang was going to fall into the manure pit, a figure flew out like a gust of wind and arrived before the manure pit in just a blink of an eye. The figure grabbed Zhu Lang's belt to pull him to his side so he would not fall into the manure pit. "New boy, you dare to challenge the 13 gangsters with just that bit of strength." Many of the onlookers mocked Zhu Lang. Although both are at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage, he couldn't even endure an attack from the person who ranks last among the 13 gangsters. It seems the newcomers today aren't very good. Many people began to mock him. Zhu Lang finally regained consciousness when people were mocking him. When he realized he nearly fell into the manure pit, he glared at Hu Lin and said resentfully, "You're so ruthless." His eyes had turned red as though he wanted to fight Hu Lin again. "Losers like you only know how to scream like AB*********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** lifting his eyes to the person who had saved him. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. Zhu Lang's expression changed dramatically when he saw how condescending Hu Lin was. He was impulsive and wanted to go up to the platform to fight him again. You're not his match. At this moment, a strong grip landed on his shoulder. Zhu Lang immediately regained his senses and looked at the person who stopped him. He thanked him wholeheartedly. Duan Lingtian, thank you. The person who saved Zhu Lang was none other than Duan Lingtian. Although Duan Lingtian and Zhu Lang had only met for the first time today, and they were not related in any way, he was still a prodigy Elder Lu had recruited for the governor's estate of Mount Hill City. Elder Lu seemed like he had a close relationship with Lin Qingrong, who had saved his life once. That was why he had saved Zhu Lang, as a way of repaying his debt of gratitude. You seem stronger than him. Do you dare to come up and try? Hu Lin asked loudly as he stood imposingly on the high platform and looked at Duan Lingtian. Dare? Hu Lin's question was undoubtedly a challenge. When Hu Lin finished speaking, everyone's eyes, including Zhu Lang, shifted to Duan Lingtian in unison. All of them were curious if Duan Lingtian would accept Hu Lin's challenge or not. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duan Lingtian ignored Hu Lin as though he did not hear him at all. His gaze landed on a figure nearby. It was none other than Guo Li. Coward, Hu Lin ridiculed. He was instantly enraged when he saw Duan Lingtian ignoring him. There was a hint of anger and disdain in his eyes when he glared at him. He was dissatisfied with Duan Lingtian for saving Zhu Lang. However, the latent dragon camp had its own set of rules. Unless someone initiated a challenge to fight for the cottage, the 13 gangsters were not allowed to challenge other members of the latent dragon camp, since it would be considered as bullying. Meanwhile, many people looked at Duan Lingtian contemptuously. They thought Duan Lingtian did not dare to fight Hu Lin. However, Duan Lingtian's subsequent words stunned them. Guo Li, you first. Duan Lingtian asked politely as he looked at Guo Li. Thanks. Originally, Guo Li was a bit hesitant, but she smiled brightly when she heard Duan Lingtian's words. She flew out immediately, captivating many youths who were present. In just a blink of an eye, she arrived next to Duan Lingtian and nodded at him before landing on the high platform. Her movement was as smooth as flowing water. Her graceful and shapely figure was extremely pleasing to the eyes. He's giving Hu Lin to Guo Li. Many people were taken aback by Duan Lingtian's action. He probably did that knowing he's not Hu Lin's match and is using Guo Li as a shielder. He's confident he can defeat the number 12 person in the 13 gangsters, someone speculated. I think it's the former. I think so, too. A lot of people thought Duan Lingtian was only using Guo Li as a shield since he knew he was not a match for Hu Lin. Duan Lingtian did not care about all these remarks. He knew it was useless for him to say anything. His gaze quickly landed on Guo Li, who stood on the high platform. She did not immediately rush to fight Hu Lin. Instead, she picked up Zhu Lang's sword and threw it back to him. After that, she only looked at Hu Lin calmly. "Thank you," Zhu Lang thanked Guo Li after keeping his sword. "Girl, you've got really good skin, however, are you really planning to fight me, Hu Lin, with that small physique?" Hu Lin asked with disdain as he sized Guo Li up. She seemed to be the same size as Zhu Lang, only she was more slender. When Guo Li raised her hand, a long, black whip appeared in her hands. It looked like a black python, dancing along with the movement her hands. Guo Li used her action to answer Hu Lin. Very well, very well. It seems that I, Hu Lin, am treated like a pushover." Hu Lin's face darkened, and his eyes gleamed with anger as he raised the iron staff in his hand. "I'd like to see what you're capable of, you little b********h, since you dare to fight with me, Hu Lin." Little b*******h. Hu Lin's words made Guo Li's expression change, and her eyes turned even colder. Without any warning, Guo Li made her move. She tipped her toes and flew out nimbly. Her movement was extremely pleasing to the eyes. Guo Li's speed became faster and faster. Not long after, the onlookers could only see her afterimage. They could not catch her movement at all. So fast, many people cried out. Guo Li's speed was even faster than Zhu Lang's speed. It seems that Hu Lin's speed is not as fast as Guo Li. Duan Lingtian's attention kept shifting between Guo Li and Hu Lin. Hu Lin's face had turned gloomy when he saw Guo Lin had flown out. As it turned out, Duan Lingtian's guess was correct. Hu Lin did not move when he saw how fast Guo Li was headed toward him because he knew he was not as fast as her, and he could not avoid her attack. Moreover, he would be in a disadvantageous position if he had tried to avoid her. That was why he wisely decided to stay in place and wait for Guo Li to come forward. However, he swung the iron staff in his hand, and airwaves gradually began to spread out similar to when he fought Zhu Lang. "It's that move again," many people exclaimed. Of course, this move is Hu Lin's kill shot. It's said to be both an offensive and a defensive move in the Saint-grade martial tactic he cultivated. It's called airtight. Airtight, it lives up to its name. When he swings his iron staff like that, even wind can't penetrate it. Not only is the defense amazing, but the offensive strike is powerful as well. A group of onlookers was whispering among themselves. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he heard their words. A move that's both offensive and defensive. Look, Hu Lin is taking the initiative to attack. Suddenly, an exclamation entered Duan Lingtian's ear and caught his attention. He immediately looked at the high platform and saw Hu Lin swinging his iron staff toward Guo Li, who was attacking with her black whip that looked like a spirit snake. It seemed like he intended to use the same old trick to knock her weapon away. HMPH. There was a look of disdain on Guo Li's face when she saw Hu Lin charging at her with his windmill-like weapon. In just a split second, she waved her long, black whip, and it immediately straightened out. True energy could be seen flickering around the long, black whip. It looked like tiny bolts of lightning that exuded a terrifying aura. Sword-like whip. Guo Li spat out 3 words when she opened her mouth. In the next moment, the straightened long, black whip seemed as though it had transformed into a sword as she stabbed it toward Hu Lin. Shoo! At this moment, Guo Li no longer seemed like she was holding a long whip, but a narrow sword instead. Sword. The disdain on Hu Lin's face intensified when he saw that. He swung the iron staff in his hand and directly faced the black whip in Guo Li's hands that seemed to have transformed into a sword. In his opinion, the black whip in Guo Li's hands would be knocked away immediately. Chang! The crisp sound of metal colliding reverberated in the air. The black whip in Guo Li's hands that seemed to have transformed into a sword clashed with Hu Lin's spinning iron staff and set off dazzling sparks. When Hu Lin was smiling smugly and continued to move the spinning iron staff in his hand forward, there was an unnoticeable movement at Guo Li's wrist. Fighting strength with strength. When her opponent is at his toughest, she instantly fights strength with softness. Guo Li's little move was not discovered by most people, including Hu Lin. Duan Lingtian was the only one who had seen her movement and guessed she was going to change tactic when she saw Hu Lin meant to fight her directly. Suddenly, the smile on Hu Lin's face froze. The onlookers could clearly see that Guo Li's straightened long, black whip had softened and was wrapped around the spinning iron staff like a spirit snake. Moments later, the spinning iron staff began to slow down. Oh, no! Hu Lin's expression changed dramatically when he discovered the iron staff in his hands were caught by the long, black whip. At this moment, Hu Lin felt a huge force tugging at the iron staff in his hands. It was Guo Li pulling the long whip in her hands to pull Hu Lin and his staff to her. Before Hu Lin could react, Guo Li extended her other hand and hit his chest. Chapter 1369. Bang! There was no doubt Hu Lin was injured by Guo Li's palm as he fell down brutally to the ground along with his staff and rolled a few times before finally coming to a halt. He was in a sorry state. Earlier, he was still one of the prestigious 13 gangsters. Now, he was just a loser who had lost to a woman. Guo Li cracked the long, black whip in her hands before it straightened again. Then she pointed it at Hu Lin and calmly said, "You lost." Creak. Before Hu Lin and the onlookers could react, the door of cottage number 12 swung open, and someone walked out. It was a young man with a similar build as Duan Lingtian. He was around 1.80 meters tall. Compared to Hu Lin, he looked thinner, however, his eyes inadvertently revealed his coldness. With just one glance, one would be able to tell he was not a nice person. Tisk tisk, Hu Lin, you're really an embarrassment to the 13 gangsters. You're defeated by a little girl. From now on, you're no longer one of the 13 gangsters, the solemn young man ridiculed Hu Lin who was struggling to stand up. Li Han. Hu Lin glanced indifferently at the solemn young man and jumped off the high platform without saying anything else. As Li Han said, he was no longer one of the 13 gangsters. If any of the 13 gangsters with a higher rank were defeated, their rank would only fall. They would not be removed from the 13 gangsters. However, he was ranked 13th, it was the last place. Guo Li is it. I'll give you 3 months at most. I, Hu Lin, will get back everything you took away from me today, Hu Lin said to Guo Lin after he jumped off the high platform. After that, he did not wait for Guo Li to respond. It seemed as though he had transformed into a gust of wind as he flew to a cottage at the outer side of the camp. He went in after he kicked the person in front of it away. Who did I mess with? The unlucky youth who was kicked away and had his cottage taken smiled bitterly. There were so many cottages, how did Huo Lin choose him? Naturally, he did not dare to fight for his cottage when Huo Lin took possession of it. What a joke! If he could take possession of a cottage from Huo Lin, he would have replaced him as one of the 13 gangsters. I didn't expect the 13 gangsters to have a female. Li Han looked at Guo Li and smiled as he stood in front of cottage number 12. However, Guo Li ignored him and looked below the high platform. Li Han's face darkened immediately. He followed Guo Li's line of sight and discovered a purple-clad young man standing there. A hint of hostility instantly rose in his eyes. Duan Lingtian, my current position is pretty awkward. Guo Li looked at Duan Lingtian and laughed. Apart from Duan Lingtian, the others, including Li Han, did not know what Guo Li's words meant. Who asked you to choose number 13? Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. He, naturally, knew what Guo Li meant. Guo Li had said she was in an awkward position because her current ranking was number 13, the last place. With this position, she would be removed from the 13 gangsters no matter who Duan Lingtian defeated. Then, I'll just have to fight another round, Guo Li said with a helpless shrug. At the same time, her eyes were filled with battle intent when it fell on Li Han. At this time, everyone present, including Li Han, finally reacted. He finally understood what Guo Li meant. She was not willing to be ranked number 13 among the 13 gangsters, she felt that it was an awkward position. Indeed, it was an awkward position. No matter who was defeated, she would be removed from the list. For example, the previous person who ranked number 13 among the 13 gangsters, Hu Lin, was okay with being ranked number 13 because he had fought with everyone except for the people in the top 5. 7 battles, 7 defeats. Therefore, he could only stay in the last place. As for the top 5 people in the 13 gangsters, they were all at the mastery stage of the mortal shedding stage. He knew his own strength very well, so he did not even dare to think about challenging them, let alone really challenging them. It seems like Guo Li wants to challenge Li Han, the 12th ranked person in the 13 gangsters. A lot of people exclaimed. If I win against Hu Lin, I'll also challenge the one ranked above him. Mind you, the higher your rank is in the 13 gangsters, the more benefits you'll get, someone else said. A lot of people agreed with him. If there was an opportunity, who would be unwilling to go one step further? Therefore, there was nothing wrong if Guo Li did that. I don't know if she can defeat Li Han. She should be able to. She defeated Hu Lin directly. Li Han's strength isn't much stronger than Hu Lin, he took almost 20 moves to defeat Hu Lin previously. The The group of youths who were discussing among themselves under the high platform had more faith in Guo Li. In fact, the young man whose cottage was taken by Guo Li previously and was taught a lesson by her due to his rudeness looked scared at this moment. If he still harbored the intention of seeking revenge earlier, he had completely dismissed that idea now. You want to challenge me? Li Han looked at Guo Li for confirmation. Come, attack me. Guo Li nodded slightly. She cracked her whip, and it slithered like a poisonous snake that emitted a saturnine aura. It was similar to how one felt when they looked at Li Han. Good, very well. Li Han's expression turned ghastly. There was a hint of ferocity in his otherwise solemn eyes. Although he was not confident he could defeat the woman before him, he could not avoid the battle now that he was put in a difficult spot. If he had avoided the fight, it would mean he surrendered. That would be even more humiliating for him. Moreover, he was not resigned to it. Much obliged, Li Han quickly spat out 2 words from his mouth and shot out as fast as a bolt of lightning before Guo Li had time to prepare. A strange wind began to blow in his wake, and he arrived before Guo Li in just a blink of an eye. That's shameless. Many people cursed when they saw Li Han sneak attack Guo Li. Naturally, they did not dare to curse openly since they were afraid of provoking him. Li Han was ranked 12th among the 13 gangsters. Among the dozens of martial and Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage at the latent dragon camp, he ranked 7th. That was sufficient to illustrate his strength. Ordinary cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage could not compare to him. However, Guo Li's expression remained unchanged when she was faced with Li Han's sneak attack. When Li Han appeared in front of her, there was a steel claw on each of his hands that exuded a cold aura. He tried to claw her face, and she cracked the long, black whip in her hands before it began to rotate. The places it reached instantly transformed into a black shield that shrouded her. This was the defensive move of the Saint-grade martial tactic she had cultivated. When she cast her defensive move, it blocked Li Han's attack. Li Han's pair of steel claws left a series of sparks, but it did not manage to break the barrier. This made Li Han's face turn extremely gloomy. He had no other choice but to retreat. The sneak attack ended in failure. After Li Han retreated, Guo Li headed straight for Li Han. Li Han tried to move faster. Although he was much stronger than Hu Lin, who was defeated by Guo Li, his speed was still slower than her. This Li Han is going to lose soon. In fact, when Li Han's attack was blocked by Guo Li's defensive move, Duan Lingtian knew he would lose. Although the defensive move barely blocked Li Han's attack, it did still block it after all. To be able to block one's opponent's attack was equivalent to being invincible. Moreover, not only was Guo Li's defense strong, but her movement technique and attacks were very strong as well. Her strength was equal in all aspect. She was a well-rounded martial cultivator. When Duan Lingtian was deep in thought, Guo Li had sent Li Han flying with her whip and defeated him in less than 10 moves. Although Li Han was injured, his injury was lighter than Hu Lin. Guo Li seemed to have held back when she used her last move to defeat Li Han, otherwise, it's impossible for Li Han's injury to be so light. Many people noticed the oddity. She's a woman after all, maybe she became soft-hearted in the last minute, someone else said. After consuming the innate medicinal pill, your injuries should be able to heal in within 15 minutes, after that, you should be able to recover your full strength, Guo Li said to Li Han as the people in the surroundings were discussing among themselves. Li Han was stunned. He did not know why Guo Li revealed everything about his injury. It was as Guo Li had said, his injuries would heal after he consumed the innate medicinal pill and cultivated for 15 minutes. The innate medicinal pill mentioned by Guo Li was equivalent to the royal-grade pills on Cloud Continent. Above the innate medicinal pills were the saint-grade pills. Duan Lingtian had long learned about this from Xuanai. Li Han's slight injury will take 15 minutes to heal after consuming the innate medicinal pill that's equivalent to royal-grade pills. Is it because of the environment in the Dao Martial Saint Land, or is it because of the medicinal efficacy of the innate medicinal pill is hard to integrate into the body of a martial cultivator at the mortal shedding stage? Duan Lingtian was puzzled. As Guo Li said, 15 minutes after Li Han consumed the innate medicinal pill, his complexion recovered, and he was energized again. He walked toward cottage number 13 behind Guo Li with a darkened face. I think, you don't have to go in, Guo Li said. What do you mean? Li Han's face sank. This little girl still wanted to humiliate him after defeating him. What she means is, you're going to be disqualified soon. At this time, a calm voice sounded from below the high platform. When it entered Li Han's ears, a third person already appeared on the high platform. Duan Lingtian stood there and took a deep breath. He could not help but revel in it. Although he could adapt to the environment below the high platform, he still preferred the environment on the high platform where he could no longer smell the foul stench from the manure pit. Wah! There was an uproar when the people saw Duan Lingtian had stepped up on the high platform. Does that mean he's going to challenge Li Han? The people regained their senses and looked at Duan Lingtian. Chapter 1370. Li Han was number 12 among the 13 gangsters. Now that he has been defeated by number 13, Guo Li, she'll take his place while he falls one rank. In other words, they're switching places. If he's defeated again, he'll also be removed from the 13 gangsters. If he's really removed, Hu Lin will definitely gloat. Li Han had mocked him when he was defeated by Guo Li earlier and was removed from the 13 gangsters. All eyes quickly shifted from Duan Lingtian to Li Han. It seems like this Duan Lingtian came together with Guo Li, someone said. That's why Guo Li didn't severely injure Li Han earlier. As it turns out, she's giving Duan Lingtian a chance to defeat Li Han and make him one of the 13 gangsters. Realization dawned on many people at this moment. You want to challenge me as well? Li Han did not think he would be challenged again before he could even catch his breath. This frustrated him. Did they really think he was a pushover? Li Han's eyes that were originally solemn flashed when he looked at Duan Lingtian. If his gaze was a knife, Duan Lingtian would have died without a corpse. Are my words not clear enough? Duan Lingtian asked as he stared at Li Han. Good, very well. Li Han's breathing quickened. The steel claws on his hands that he had kept appeared again. It made for a mesmerizing sight as it gleamed coldly under the light. I want to see how you're going to disqualify me. As soon as Li Han finished his sentence, he moved and tried to gain the upper hand with a preemptive strike again. That pair of steel claws left a trail of claw marks and a sky full of claws shadows that shrouded Duan Lingtian as though it intended to trap him. Duan Lingtian's face remained unchanged faced with Li Han's fierce attacks. A bow quickly appeared in his hands. It was the sun-shooting bow. The onlookers were staring unblinkingly at the battle happening before their eyes. All of them wanted to know who would win in the end. Would it be Guo Li's confident friend or the person who had fallen a rank and was currently ranked number 13? Guo Li was the only one that had no expectation since she already knew who was going to win. Duan Lingtian was stronger than her. If she can defeat Li Han, naturally, there was not going to be any suspense in his and Li Han's battle. Unfortunately, Li Han was unaware of Guo Li's thoughts. Currently, Li Han had already used all the moves he had. He only wanted to defeat Duan Lingtian to regain the dignity he had lost to Guo Li. He found it humiliating to be defeated by a woman. Without knowing when, Hu Lin had also walked out from the dilapidated cottage. His gaze landed on the high platform. Li Han, I want to see if you'll still remain one of the 13 gangsters after today. A sneer crept up on Hu Lin's face. He noticed Guo Li's indifference and realized there won't be any suspense in the battle. Die. Li Han glided out, slamming the steel claws down from the sky as the skyful of claws shadows rained down on Duan Lingtian. At this moment, Li Han was in a frenzy, and he had completely forgotten about the rules in the latent dragon camp. A man stood at a pavilion next to the high platform. It was unknown whether he had just appeared or he had been there for a long time. It was a middle-aged man with a cold expression on his face dressed in silver armor. His body seemed to emit a cold aura as he stood there. He was one of the 36 guardians of the city governor's Mount Hill City. The weakest among the 36 guardians was at the perfection stage of the mortal shedding stage. He was ranked 14th and was known as the Heavenly Harm Guardian. Currently, the Heavenly Harm Guardian was silently looking at the battling figures on the high platform. He did not interfere even though Li Han was in a killing frenzy and was ignoring the Latent Dragon Camp's rules. This was not because he did not care about the rules of Latent Dragon Camp, it was because he could tell Li Han could not injure the purple-clad young man. Li Han's going to lose in within 3 moves, the Heavenly Harm Guardian murmured. However, his eyes instantly narrowed in the next moment when he saw what happened next. The purple-clad young man did not hide or widen the distance and attack with his archery set when faced with Li Han's fierce attack like what the Heavenly Harm Guardian had expected. Instead, the purple-clad young man stood there, unmoving, with his hand on the bowstring. When he saw Li Han was moving closer to him, he moved and pulled the bowstring before releasing it. He kept pulling and releasing the bowstring. Chang, 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 a series of noise that was similar to an unpleasant note reverberated in the air. With every note that sounded, a true energy light blade swept out. The true energy light blades soared up and clashed with the skyfall of Claw's shadows. Naturally, the Claw's shadows were destroyed by the true energy light blades. The momentum of the light blades remained as it soared up to the sky before it finally disappeared. For a time, the only thing that remained was Li Han's last attempt at an attack. He was like a fierce goshawk as he dove down from the sky. His bloodshot eyes and the steel claws on his hands were similar to a goshawk. The sharp claws clawed through the air and almost tore Duan Lingtian's head off. Chang! When the sharp claws almost landed, a dull noise sounded. The noise came from an arrow formed by the true energy that was shot out from the sun-shooting bow when it collided with the steel claws on Li Han's hands. Boom! A loud bang sounded when the arrow formed by true energy exploded. In contrast, the steel claws on Li Han's hands were blown away. His hands were in a bloody mess. If it was not for the steel claws, his hands would have been mangled. You lost, Duan Lingtian said after he glanced coldly at Li Han who had fallen to the ground. His tone was calm and void of any emotion as usual. Lost. After Li Han heard his words, he jumped off the high platform and walked toward one of the dilapidated cottages. He looked somewhat distracted, there was a hint of despair on his face. The original owner of the cottage avoided Li Han as though he was a ghost when he saw him heading over. He was sensible enough to willingly relinquish his claim on the cottage. Li Han, stop playing the fool, you didn't expect this to happen today, did you? At this time, Hu Lin did not forget how Li Han had added salt to his injury earlier and mocked him in return. When Li Han heard Hu Lin's words, his body trembled before he quickly sped up and entered the cottage. Hu Lin's sight quickly shifted to the high platform again. Just be complacent, I'll break through to the Master Immortal shedding stage in within 3 months. At that time, I'll defeat both of you one by one and redeem myself. After looking at the people who were in high spirits on the high platform, Hu Lin turned around and returned to the cottage to cultivate diligently. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li smiled at each other. Both of them were prodigies invited by Lin Qingrong, and both of them simultaneously became part of the 13 gangsters. It must be destiny. Guo Li, you're entering the wrong one. When Duan Lingtian was about to enter cottage number 13, he discovered Guo Li had already gone in first. He was stunned. I didn't enter the wrong one, this is where I belong. After Guo Li entered the cottage, she turned around and smiled at Duan Lingtian before she closed the door. What did Guo Li mean by that? The onlookers were puzzled by it. What else? Guo Li must think that she's not as strong as Duan Lingtian, that's why she's willing to be number 13 and give the 12th ranking to Duan Lingtian. There were a few people who understood what was going on. Duan Lingtian is strong indeed, he defeated Li Han even though Li Han had fought with his life. It's not a big deal if he only defeated him, more importantly, he can actually avoid killing Li Han or injuring him when he was fighting with his life. When he was still being praised, Duan Lingtian returned to cottage number 12 that was going to be his residence for the time being. In the pavilion, the Heaven Harm Guardian's eyes gleamed as he murmured to himself, it seems like the Heavenly Hero Guardian brought them back. The Heavenly Hero Guardian he mentioned was Lin Qingrong. Lin Qingrong was also one of the 36 guardians of the city governor of the Mount Hill City. He ranked No. 9 among the 36 guardians. Only the top 10 guardians of the 36 guardian under the city governor of Mount Hill City possessed 2 names. They were allowed to keep their original name. The remaining 26 guardians only had 1 name, and they were all named after the 36 heavenly stars. The latent dragon camp did not quiet down after Duan Lingtian and Guo Li's departure, in fact, it became even livelier. Within a day, 2 people in the latent dragon camp's 13 gangsters were changed. Many people would remember today. Snap. In the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City, within an independent mansion, a middle-aged scholar sitting in a pergola had crushed the teacup in his hand after he listened to the report from a servant. It shocked the servants outside the pergola. Ha ha ha, good, good, great job, great job. After crushing the teacup, the middle-aged scholar laughed heartily. His laughter was carefree. I'm not wrong about them, Duan Lingtian, Guo Li, well done. He was naturally excited. This time when the city governor's estate was recruiting prodigies from outside, apart from people the 36 guardians sent, even the revered elder of the city governor's estate had also left to invite prodigies to join them. He, Lin Qingrong, the 9th guardian of the 36 guardians, the heavenly hero guardian, had brought back 2 prodigies who became part of the 13 gangsters on their first day in Latent Dragon Camp. He could imagine it would not be long before he was summoned by the city governor. Maybe he might even be generously rewarded. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li really made me proud. The more Lin Qingrong thought about it, the happier he was. He was so happy that he was smiling from ear to ear. Although he was one of the 10 most important guardians in the city governor's estate, there were always 8 other guardians above him, therefore, he felt particularly proud today. Putting everything else aside, who else could compete with his foresight on the selection of prodigies for the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City this time? Chapter 1371. In cottage number 12 on the high platform at the latent dragon camp, Duan Lingtian leisurely lay in bed. It was rare that he did not enter the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda to cultivate. Compared to the dilapidated cottages near the manure pit beneath the high platform, the cottage Duan Lingtian was in was like a paradise on earth. That was one of the benefits of being part of the 13 gangsters. Moreover, Duan Lingtian also learned that even the lowest ranking person in the 13 gangsters would receive 108th grade saint stones every month. Since he ranked 12th, he would receive 208th grade saint stones. Those who ranked in front of him would receive more saint stones. The first among the 13 gangsters would receive 1,308th grade saint stones, it was equivalent to 137th grade saint stones. 137th grade saint stones are equivalent to 13 6th grade saint stones, all that in just 1 month. Duan Lingtian stuck his tongue out. However, the first among the 13 gangsters is not only at the Master Immortal shedding stage, but he's also the strongest among all 5 of the martial and Dao cultivators at the Master Immortal shedding stage in the latent dragon camp. With my current strength, I can't even win against ordinary people at the Master Immortal shedding stage, let alone the strongest person among the 13 gangsters. Duan Lingtian really felt he was weak when he thought about this. He had been in the latent dragon camp of the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City for a few days now. During these few days, he had gained a certain understanding of latent dragon camp. Latent dragon camp was established by the city governor of Mount Hill City. It was dedicated to recruiting and grooming young prodigies from the surrounding areas of Mount Hill City. This round's recruitment of young prodigies began half a year ago. There was an age restriction for the young prodigies recruited by the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. Only martial cultivators and Dao cultivators under 40 years old were allowed to enter the latent dragon camp. The latent dragon camp was also the reserve for the 36 guardians under city governor of Mount Hill City. At the surrounding areas of Mount Hill City, there was almost no one who did not know about the 36 guardians. They were the best of the best under the city governor of Mount Hill City. The weakest among them were also at the perfection mortal shedding stage. It was said that the stronger ones were at the paramount stage. In fact, there were also a few who had entered the saint rudiment stage. Naturally, those were the rumors that Duan Lingtian heard. However, Senior Lin is one of the 36 guardians, that's surprising. Duan Lingtian also learned that Lin Qingrong was one of the 36 guardians. He was ranked number 9, and he was known as the Heavenly Hero Guardian. It's said that the top 10 guardians among the 36 guardians will become revered elders of the city governor's estate in a few years' time. At that time, there'll only be 26 guardians left, the remaining 10 guardians will be selected from the latent dragon camp. During these few days, Duan Lingtian kept his ears open for information regarding the latent dragon camp. Naturally, he did not go snooping around. It was very lively under the high platform. All he needed to do was crack open the door of his cottage to hear the noises coming from outside. Everything he heard was said by other members of the latent dragon camp. Now, I can be considered as having settled down in the Dao martial saint land. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes as he muttered, I wonder how the girls are doing, and then there's Shui Nai. She should have stopped looking for me, right? Duan Lingtian understood Han Shui Nai very well. She would not notify Half Moon Island of his disappearance before she found him because she was afraid his 2 fiancés and the 3 little fellows would worry. Due to this reason, Duan Lingtian did not have any plan of returning for now. Naturally, there was another reason as well. He was afraid. That's right, he was afraid. When he came, he encountered many life or death situations because he lost his way. It made him realize the strength and horror of the wild beasts in the vast ocean and made him realize how valuable life was. In the past, in order to become strong enough to protect himself, he went into closed-door cultivation on the 2nd level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda for 3 years and successfully opened up 15 saint veins and broke through to the early mortal shedding stage. However, even with his cultivation base at the early mortal shedding stage, he was still almost killed by several master Immortal shedding stage wild beasts. Fortunately, Lin Qingrong was there and had saved him. Therefore, he did not plan to return to Cloud Continent until he had sufficient strength to protect himself. Strength? I'm still too weak right now. Duan Lingtian sighed and stood up to close the door. At once, the noises outside sounded softer, it was almost negligible. After closing the door, Duan Lingtian retrieved the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda in the cottage. With a thought, Duan Lingtian entered the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda. Elder Huo, give me a reminder after 2.5 months. After greeting Elder Huo, Duan Lingtian went up to the 2nd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda. Naturally, when Duan Lingtian said 2.5 months, he meant 2.5 months inside the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda time. 2.5 months inside the 2nd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda were equivalent to nearly 1 month in the outside world. At that time, it would be the day that members of the latent dragon camps receive their saint stones. He was rank number 12 among the 13 gangsters, so he would receive 208th grade saint stones. Although 200 saint stones were nothing compared to the thousands of high-grade saint stones Shui Nai had given to him in the past, one had to know that even the smallest mosquito had meat. After Duan Lingtian arrived at the 2nd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda, he was not in a hurry to cultivate. Instead, he began to study his current strength. With my current strength and the sun-shooting bow, there shouldn't be a lot of opponents that can beat me among the martial and Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. A thought flashed in Duan Lingtian's mind. Naturally, he did not dare to guarantee he could defeat all of the martial and Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. He would not be a match for them if they were at the intermediate mortal shedding stage and had cultivated the saint-grade martial tactic or Dao method to an extremely high stage. Compared to other martial or Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage, my current advantage, apart from having a body stronger than the 5-clawed divine dragon, is the sun-shooting bow. Although I can't fully utilize the strength of the sun-shooting bow with my current strength, it is still far ahead compared to human-rank mediocre saint weapons wielded by those at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. A few days ago, Duan Lingtian had seen Guo Li, Hu Lin, and Li Han use their human-rank mediocre saint weapons. That was why he was so certain about this matter. As for the advantages from my saint veins, it'll only be obvious among martial cultivators and Dao cultivators at the same level as I am, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. After all, he only opened up his saint veins when he became a martial cultivator at the mortal shedding stage. However, the true energy in my chi-si is limited. If I can break through to the intermediate mortal shedding stage, I'm confident that even without my physical strength or the sun-shooting bow, I can easily defeat martial and Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage even if they unleash their full strength. Duan Lingtian was very confident about this. At that time, the number of saint veins in his body would be beyond comparison to other martial and Dao cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. If he went against a martial or Dao cultivator at the same level, his true energy would have been used by his ridiculous number of saint veins before his opponent could even utilize the true energy in their chi-si. As long as he made the first move, his opponent would be defeated before they can even utilize their true energy. Intermediate mortal shedding stage, I don't know how long it'll take me to break through to that stage. Duan Lingtian's heart was filled with anxiety as he prepared to cultivate. He retrieved the saint stones Han Shui Nai had given to him. They were 5th grade saint stones. It was his first time cultivating with the saint stones given to him by Han Shui Nai. Previously, when he broke through from the peak of the martial emperor stage to the early mortal shedding stage, he had been using 9th grade saint stones to cultivate during that 3 years. During that time, he had almost depleted all his 9th grade saint stones. Those 9th grade saint stones were the leftovers from Half Moon Island. Duan Lingtian did not want to waste them, so he had decided to use the low-grade saint stones in his hands first. He had used up the 9th grade saint stones to break through to the early mortal shedding stage. Currently, he only had the high-grade saint stones given to him by Han Shui Nai for cultivation. Among the thousands of saint stones given by Han Shui Nai to him, 90% of them were 5th grade saint stones, and 10% were 4th grade saint stones. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, 9 Dragons Form. Duan Lingtian closed his eyes as he held a 5th grade saint stone. At the same time, he began to absorb the heaven and earth spirit energy in the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda's 2nd level to cultivate. Although the heaven and earth spirit energy at the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City was very dense, it was only comparable to the heaven and earth spirit energy at the first level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. The heaven and earth spirit energy at the second level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda was far denser than the heaven and earth spirit energy at the city governor's estate of Mount Hill City. While absorbing the heaven and earth spirit energy at the second level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, he was also absorbing the heaven and earth spirit energy from the fifth grade Saint Stone. After he circulated a great chi circulatory cycle, Duan Ling Tian opened both his eyes suddenly. The speed of cultivation by absorbing a fifth grade Saint Stone isn't much faster than absorbing a ninth grade Saint Stone. However, the heaven and earth spirit energy contained in it is indeed much more than a ninth grade Saint Stone. Duan Ling Tian looked at the fifth grade Saint Stone in his hands. He could see the substantial amount of heaven and earth spirit energy that was flowing from the fifth grade Saint Stone into his body. According to what Shui Nai said, a fifth grade Saint Stone will last longer than a ninth grade Saint Stone. With my current cultivation speed, I'll deplete a ninth grade Saint Stone in just a day. Naturally, this was also because of Duan Ling Tian's ridiculously fast cultivation speed. Duan Ling Tian had 15 saint veins to absorb the heaven and earth spirit energy for cultivation. His cultivation speed had even surpassed most of the martial cultivators at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. After all, the factor that affected the absorption rate of the heaven and earth spirit energy was the number of saint veins. Due to that reason, one's cultivation speed would be faster the more saint veins one had. If an ordinary martial or Dao cultivator at the early stage of the mortal shedding stage were to compare their cultivation speed with Duan Ling Tian, they would definitely feel like dying. Normally, a martial or Dao cultivator at the early mortal shedding stage has to cultivate a few days before they'll deplete a ninth grade Saint Stone. Throughout the cultivation process, if they keep changing Saint Stones, it'll affect their cultivation speed to a certain extent. Hence, it's best to use high-grade Saint Stones when cultivating if it's possible so they don't have to change it so often. Duan Ling Tian discovered one of the benefits of a high-grade Saint Stone. Chapter 1372. Shui Nai gave me 4th grade Saint Stones as well. The durability of a 4th grade Saint Stone is equivalent to 10 5th grade Saint Stones according to the conversion ratio between the various grades of Saint Stones in the Dao Martial Saint Land, Duan Ling Tian thought to himself. With my current cultivation base and cultivation speed, a 5th grade Saint Stone will still have a lot of leftover energy even after helping me to break through from the early mortal shedding stage. Soon after, Duan Ling Tian closed his eyes again to cultivate. The heaven and earth spirit energy from the second level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda and the 5th grade Saint Stone kept flowing into his body. The 10th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, 9 Dragons Form Cultivation Method, had transformed into 9 dragons and carried the heaven and earth spirit energy along the 15 saint veins to circulate the great chi circulatory cycle before it transformed into true energy and integrated with the chi si in the middle of Duan Ling Tian's eyebrows. The true energy kept increasing in the chi si that was as big as a pigeon's egg. Although the increase was minimal, sooner or later it would be full after it had accumulated. The day it was completely filled would be the day Duan Ling had broken through to the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. To cultivate from the early mortal shedding stage to the intermediate mortal shedding stage is much easier than breaking through from the peak of the martial emperor stage to the early mortal shedding stage. Duan Ling Tian knew this very well. After all, the latter had to integrate the profundities into the origin energy and then transform it into true energy. Moreover, it had to open up the saint veins. It was extremely inconvenient. The former was much simpler. It would be done once the chi si was completely filled with true energy. He would then break through and open up his saint veins. Time passed by very quickly when one was cultivating. In just a blink of an eye, 2.5 months had passed. Duan Ling Tian, who was roused by Elder Huo, left the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda and returned to cottage number 12. After keeping the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda, Duan Ling Tian opened the door. It did not take long before Guo Li showed up in front of his door. Duan Ling Tian, we should go and receive our saint stones, Guo Li said to Duan Ling Tian. It's today, Duan Ling Tian asked. From today onward, we have 3 days to pick them up. The place where they are distributing saint stones is very near. It's at the pavilion next to the 13 gangsters' cottages, Guo Li said. That pavilion? Duan Ling Tian was surprised. He remembered seeing that pavilion when he first arrived at the latent dragon camp. Back then, he had wondered what that place was. It seemed like that place was where the powerhouse from the city governor's estate resided. That powerhouse was also responsible for guarding the members of the Latent Dragon camp. There were rules in the Latent Dragon camp after all, and rules only worked when there were supervision and enforcement. Let's go. Duan Lingtian stepped out of his room and walked toward the pavilion with Guo Li. During the journey, both of them caught a lot of people's attention. That's Duan Lingtian and Guo Li. That's right. A month ago, they entered the ranks of the 13 gangsters. They seem like a perfect match. Are they a couple? Many people saw Duan Lingtian and Guo Li and began to gossip about them. Some of them even thought they were a couple. Duan Lingtian did not take the remarks to heart and merely laughed it off. However, it was different for Guo Li as she began to blush. Hi, Duan Lingtian. When they arrived near the pavilion, Duan Lingtian heard someone greeting him. Upon closer inspection, he discovered it was Zhu Lang. Zhu Lang, why are you alone? Where's Hu Jia? Duan Lingtian asked, puzzled, when he realized Zhu Lang was alone. HMPH. He has climbed the social ladder, the person ranked No. 5 among the 13 gangsters, that master Immortal shedding stage powerhouse, is his distant cousin brother. Zhu Lang said with a snort. Isn't that good? You're pretty close to him, right? He can look out for you in the future, Duan Lingtian said with a smile. Look out for me. It'll be good enough if he doesn't kill me. Zhu Lang laughed self-deprecatingly and looked at Guo Li before he said, Guo Li, you're also from a 9th-rate family, you'll know better. Maybe Hu Jia and I are close because we were in the same boat, but once he found protection, how do you think he'll treat me? Kill you for his family, Guo Li said bluntly. Zhu Lang and Hu Jia were a bit like her and Yi Man, the prodigy of the Yi clan from Fuyu Town, whom Duan Lingtian replaced. Anyway, I'll go first. Zhu Lang jumped down from the high platform and returned to his cottage after he greeted both of them. Duan Lingtian shook his head and entered the pavilion with Guo Li. The person responsible for distributing the origin stones was the person who was guarding the Latent Dragon camp, the Heavenly Harm Guardian. The Heavenly Harm Guardian ranked number 14 among the 36 guardians. Guo Li, 108th grade Saint Stones. Duan Lingtian, 208th grade Saint Stones. The Heavenly Harm Guardian's face was solemn from the beginning until the end as he handed Saint Stones woodenly to Duan Lingtian and Guo Li. Both of them received the origin stones and thanked him. Perfection stage of the mortal shedding stage. During that period of time, Duan Lingtian used the divine eye to probe the Heavenly Harm Guardian and discovered his strength. In this regard, Duan Lingtian was not surprised. Without a cultivation base above the perfection mortal shedding stage, he would not be able to guard the Latent Dragon camp. At least, he would not be able to overpower the top few 13 gangsters. Duan Lingtian did not notice that when he and Guo Li turned to leave, the Heavenly Harm Guardian had actually lifted his head to look at him. He looked different from before. After Duan Lingtian and Guo Li left the pavilion, they went back. Duan Lingtian, the members of Latent Dragon camp will have a chance to go out once every 3 months. Are you preparing to go out as well? Guo Li asked as she looked at Duan Lingtian. No, Duan Lingtian shook his head. I have nothing to do even if I go out. I don't plan to either. Who knows if the two clans sent anyone to lurk outside of the city governor's estate to kill me, Guo Li said. They dare to kill you in Mount Hill City. Duan Lingtian was surprised. Why wouldn't they? If they have the chance, they'll even sneak into the city governor's estate to kill me, Guo Li replied. They aren't afraid of the punishment from the city governor's estate. Duan Lingtian frowned. As far as he knew, Fuyu Town was under the jurisdiction of Mount Hill City. Punishment. Guo Li shook her head. Currently, I'm still not qualified to ask the city governor's estate for any favor. Even if I am killed now, the city governor's estate won't blame the 2 largest clans of Fuyu Town just because of me. I'll be truly safe only when the city governor's estate acknowledges my worth, Guo Li continued saying. Duan Lingtian nodded. You're Duan Lingtian, the one who defeated Li Han and became the new number 12 of the 13 gangsters. Give me half of the Saint Stones you received. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li had just arrived at the cottage when a voice sounded from nearby. Following that, both of them saw a black-clad youth from cottage number 6 walking toward them. The black-clad youth was tall and muscular. His gait was similar to a dragon's gambol and a tiger's prowl. It's Zhang Jilong. He's ranked number 6 among the 13 gangsters. This Zhang Jilong usually extorts the 13 gangsters ranked behind him for Saint Stones with his strength. However, doesn't he usually start with the last one? It's probably because she's a female, that's why he's showing compassion. At this time, the eyes of the youths beneath the high platform landed on Duan Lingtian, Guo Li, and Zhang Jilong. Many people came out from their cottages regardless if they were on the high platform or below the high platform. They had heard the commotion and came out to watch the show. Duan Lingtian was calm even when he was faced with Zhang Jilong, who came bearing ill intention. He silently opened the divine eye. Zhang Jilong, 32 years old. His cultivation base was at the intermediate stage of the mortal shedding stage. Why should I give it to you? Duan Lingtian sneered as he glanced at Zhang Jilong. I don't just want you to give me half of it now, I want all the saint stones you received earlier. 200 saint stones. Hand it over. Zhang Jilong stood in front of Duan Lingtian calmly, but his tone was insolent and domineering. Idiot. Duan Lingtian spat out the word as he stared at Zhang Jilong coldly. Idiot. There was an uproar after Duan Lingtian spoke. Is this Duan Lingtian crazy? He dares to call Zhang Jilong an idiot. I'm not dreaming, am I? Ah, it hurts. Why did you pinch my thigh? Let's watch something fun. The group of young men and women beneath the high platform were looking at the high platform with great interest. Usually, they would only cultivate. It was quite boring, they were always in high spirits whenever conflicts arose. On the high platform, apart from the top 13 gangsters at the Mastery Mortal Shedding stage, the rest of the 13 gangsters at the Intermediate Mortal Shedding stage also came out of their cottages. They watched the confrontation between Duan Lingtian and Zhang Jilong with great interest. Similar to the group of youth beneath the high platform, they also came out to watch the action. Naturally, these people had one thing in common. That was, they were all victims of Zhang Jilong's extortion. They had given half of the saint stones they received today to Zhang Jilong. They were also unwilling to give up their saint stones. However, they had no choice but to comply. Otherwise, they would definitely be beaten up by Zhang Jilong and would not be able to get out of bed for a month. That would only impede their cultivation. In this case, the loss outweighed the gain. Therefore, they would honestly give half of the saint stones they received to Zhang Jilong every month. Boy, don't think you're so amazing just because you defeated Li Han a month ago. In front of me, Li Han won't even last half a move. Zhang Jilong looked at Duan Lingtian calmly. Although he spoke calmly, people who were astute could detect his anger. If one were to say Zhang Jilong was a volcano, then currently he was a volcano on the verge of erupting. In his eyes, no matter if it was Li Han or Duan Lingtian, they were not worth mentioning at all. However, today, one of them dared to disobey him. He felt as though his dignity was challenged. So what? Duan Lingtian still had a sneer on his face. Come and get it yourself if you want the saint stones in my hands. If you dare not, then just get out of my sight. No, don't get out of my sight. I almost forgot. You're ranked number 6 among the 13 gangsters, right? Duan Lingtian suddenly asked. He seemed to have recalled something. Chapter 1373. When Duan Lingtian first started to speak, the onlookers were already dumbfounded. Duan Lingtian was too fearless, daring to provoke Zhang Jilong like that. Furthermore, what did he mean by his last sentence? Why would he ask whether Zhang Jilong was number 6 among the 13 gangsters? Unless he wanted to. The onlookers did not dare to continue that thought. They all felt chills travel up their spines, thinking that Duan Lingtian was crazy. Insane. The latent dragon camp gathered the top prodigies from the surrounding area of Mount Hill City. Zhang Jilong was capable of being the number 1 person at the intermediate mortal shedding stage in the latent dragon camp. To a certain extent, he would be considered the top person at the intermediate mortal shedding stage around the surrounding area of Mount Hill City. How could Duan Lingtian dare to provoke someone like that? Did he think he could defeat Zhang Jilong? Where did he get such confidence? Currently, even Guo Li, who was absolutely confident in Duan Lingtian, could not help but worry for him. She spoke to him through true energy voice transmission. Duan Lingtian, why don't you give him the 200 grade 8 saint stones? I still have 100 grade 8 saint stones with me. I can give you 50, which would be enough for your cultivation, Guo Li suggested. That's right, I ranked number 6 at the latent dragon camp's 13 gangsters. Why? Do you want to challenge me? When he heard Duan Lingtian's words, Zhang Jilong was so angry that he cackled. He was boiling with unquenchable anger. It seems that you're more than an ordinary idiot. Wasn't what I said obvious enough? The others could see it, but you couldn't. You still had to ask. Duan Lingtian mocked in disdain. Do you want to die? Zhang Jilong was not an even-tempered person ordinarily, what more now that he was repeatedly provoked by Duan Lingtian. Boom, he jumped with his legs, transforming into a cannonball and shooting towards Duan Lingtian. He should have attacked a long time ago. Facing the incoming Zhang Jilong, Duan Lingtian snorted. In a split second, he retrieved the sun-shooting bow. Moreover, he also used true energy to form an arrow in his right hand. Body and arrow synchronization. Noticing that Zhang Jilong was only a few meters away from him, Duan Lingtian pulled open the sun-shooting bow slightly while raising his hand. Naturally, he exerted his full strength. Therefore, the arrow that flew out was still outrageously fast even though the sun-shooting bow was only slightly pulled open. Duan Lingtian stepped on the arrow and passed across the incoming Zhang Jilong. They almost brushed against each other's shoulders. The speed he displayed was as fast as Zhang Jilong. Zhang Jilong does indeed have something up his sleeves, his speed is about the same as mine. Duan Lingtian, who shot out with his arrow and exchanged positions with Zhang Jilong, had turned and looked at the latter, who turned at the same time. The surprise was apparent on his face. Zhang Jilong had a plan to become the #1 person at the intermediate mortal shedding stage in the latent dragon camp. Zhang Jilong was just as surprised as Duan Lingtian. This boy's speed, he was as fast as me. Zhang Jilong was utterly shocked. Ever since he broke through to the intermediate mortal shedding stage, apart from people who were at the mastery mortal shedding stage, he had not met any intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivator who could catch up with him. As the saying went, in the martial skills under the heavens, only speed is unbeatable. Zhang Jilong could command respect among the intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivators mostly because of his speed. He so fast that he became undefeatable. Coupled with his attacks which were formidable, he had never met an evenly matched opponent among the intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivators and Dao cultivators. Did he catch up with Zhang Jilong? Now, the pavilion which gave out saint stones was already closed. On the balcony of that pavilion, one of the 36 guardians of the governor's estate in Mount Hill City, the Heavenly Harm Guardian, was watching the confrontation in astonishment. His attention was focused on the purple figure. Did you guys see that? The few other intermediate mortal shedding stage 13 gangsters looked at one another in the eyes and saw shock. All of them had lost to Zhang Jilong before. They had battled with Zhang Jilong, so they naturally knew the reason he could beat them was that of his outrageous speed. And now, there was another intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivator who could catch up with Zhang Jilong's speed. How was it not shocking to them? Was another Zhang Jilong born? They were conflicted. Realizing how fast Duan Lingtian was earlier, they knew that they were likely to be defeated if they went up against him. He was simply so swift that he could be compared to Zhang Jilong. Such mind-blowing speed. Duan Lingtian actually had some reservations when he defeated Li Han a month ago. If he had revealed such speed then, I think Li Han would have been defeated before he had the chance to attack. Oh, God, his speed was about the same with Zhang Jilong's. The group of youth beneath the high platform were fanatical as they all stared intently at Duan Lingtian. Such breakneck speed. In the corner of the crowd, Li Han stood there with a distorted expression. It seems that unless I break through to the mastery mortal shedding stage, I wouldn't be able to redeem myself. I must break through to the mastery mortal shedding stage before he does. As he thought of that, Li Han returned to his wooden house and started cultivating while holding a saint stone. You would be amused wondering what expression he would have if he knew that Duan Lingtian was merely an early mortal shedding stage martial cultivator right now. 2 months, 2 more months at the most, then I'll definitely defeat you. Although Hu Lin was also horrified by Duan Lingtian's speed, he was still filled with confidence because he was sure he could break through to the mastery mortal shedding stage in 2 months' time. By then, not only would he defeat Guo Li to redeem himself, but he also wanted to defeat Duan Lingtian to prove his strength to everyone in the latent dragon camp. No wonder you're so arrogant. You had the capital to do so. However, do you think you can defeat me just by being able to catch up with me? Zhang Jilong said coldly. I'd have to try to know whether I can defeat you or not, Duan Lingtian said faintly. All right, then, I shall do you that favor. Once Zhang Jilong finished his sentence, his whole body shot out while his legs swept towards Duan Lingtian like a whirlwind. Wherever he passed, it was like there was a tornado. He headed straight for Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian had long discovered that Zhang Jilong's saint weapon was his pair of boots. Regardless of his speed or his attack, all he relied on were his legs, just as Duan Lingtian depended on the arrow in his hands for his speed and his attack. Facing the tornado caused by Zhang Jilong's legs, Duan Lingtian shot upwards. He knocked the arrow and drew his bow while his eyes locked onto Zhang Jilong. Then, he let go of the bowstring. Chang! Instantly, the arrow, which was formed by true energy, shot out across the sky towards Zhang Jilong, leaving behind an arrow trail. HMPH. Zhang Jilong snorted, his legs becoming quicker while the tornado turned fiercer as it swept towards the true energy arrows shot by Duan Lingtian. Finally, a loud bang erupted when the tornado met the arrow. Boom! A vast airwave swept out and moments later, the tornado slowed down and disappeared. Zhang Jilong's body trembled and he was blown away by the airwaves. At the same time, barely able to stand still, he felt something stuck in his throat. His face was slightly pale as he forcefully swallowed the blood in his throat back. His pride forbade him from spitting blood out at a time like this. Once he spat out blood, it was undoubtedly an announcement that he, Zhang Jilong, had lost to Duan Lingtian. Such a proud person, Duan Lingtian, who landed firmly, was unscathed. He looked over at Zhang Jilong. The others might not know the force of his arrow, but he did. Although it was offset by Zhang Jilong's movements, the airwave caused by the clash was sufficient to injure him. If he had been nearby at that time, he would have been injured too. However, because he used the arrow, which was a long-range weapon, it was destined that he would not be affected by the airwaves. In that regard, he had an advantage. No matter their attack or their speed, Zhang Jilong and him were evenly matched. However, he was destined to beat his opponent in an actual battle because his weapon of choice was an archery set. Zhang Jilong's injuries were so well hidden that even the several intermediate mortal shedding stage 13 gangsters did not notice it. If none of those people realized that, what more the one beneath the high platform or those behind the manure pit? Duan Lingtian continued confronting Zhang Jilong and asked, "Hey, Zhang Jilong, is it? Do you still want to continue?" Wah! Having heard Duan Lingtian's words, Zhang Jilong became mad again and the blood which he had swallowed came up only to be spat out savagely. The blood stained the ground like a dazzling red rose. Wah! The scene became deadly silent. Zhang Jilong was injured. The audience was aghast. They really did not see that coming. If there was someone who was not surprised, it would be none other than Duan Lingtian and the person in the pavilion, the Heavenly Harm Guardian. Huh! Suddenly, the Heavenly Harm Guardian in the pavilion frowned as if he sensed something and then he looked at the sky into the distance. From afar, a figure was controlling the air and flying towards him at a speed so quick that he could only catch a glimpse of the person. In the blink of an eye, that person was already standing beside him. A middle-aged man in green appeared beside the Heavenly Harm Guardian. He was average in size but lean. When he stood there, he inconspicuously exuded a lot of pressure. 14. Eventually, he spoke while looking towards the Heavenly Harm Guardian with a slight smile. "Eldest brother." The Heavenly Harm Guardian took a deep breath and bowed respectfully towards the middle-aged man in green, not daring to slight him. His eyes were laced with excitement. That was his eldest brother. The leader of the 36 Guardians, the Heavenly Leader Guardian. At the same time, his eldest brother was among the few powerhouses of the 36 Guardians who had entered the Saint Rudiment stage. Who's that? Did he defeat Zhang Jilong? The Heavenly Leader Guardian's gaze was fixed on the purple figure below as he said in surprise, "I don't think I've seen him before, is he new?" "Ninth brother brought him back," the Heavenly Harm Guardian said. Ninth brother brought him back. The Heavenly Leader Guardian was even more surprised. Is he that Duan Lingtian? The prodigy martial cultivator from the mortal continents? Chapter 1374. After Zhang Jilong, who had been defeated by Duan Lingtian, swallowed a healing medicinal pill, he snapped at Duan Lingtian with a solemn face, "Duan Lingtian, I'll avenge the shame that I feel today." His eyes were gleaming with a ferocious luster. At that moment, Duan Lingtian felt like as though he was being glared at by a poisonous snake, causing his heart to sink as he realized that this Zhang Jilong was a dangerous character. "What, do you refuse to admit your defeat?" Duan Lingtian smirked. Just as Zhang Jilong was about to say something, a whistling reverberated in the wind and in the next instance, everybody present at the scene noticed that someone had just appeared on the high platform. It was a middle-aged man in silver armor. This person was not unfamiliar to most of them. It's Lord Heavenly Harm Guardian. He's one of the 36 guardians of Lord City Governor. Lord Heavenly Harm Guardian, who's also ranked 14th, is also the overseer for our latent dragon camp. A series of whispers entered Duan Lingtian's ears. He's also one of the 36 guardians under the command of the governor of Mount Hill City. Duan Lingtian recognized the silver-armored man. He was the person who had distributed the saint stones to them, but it had never crossed his mind that he was also one of the 6 guardians under the command of the governor of Mount Hill City. On top of that, he was ranked 14th too. Lord Heavenly Harm Guardian. Lord Heavenly Harm Guardian, many people bowed towards the Lord Heavenly Harm Guardian. Heavenly Leader Guardian, the leader of the 36 guardians, gave out an order that all of the 13 gangsters are required to go to the assembly hall at the city governor's estate now. All of you must be present, the Heavenly Harm Guardian announced. When he reached the end of his sentence, the true energy contained in his voice exploded like a blast and spread out to the entire latent dragon camp. He's reminding the 5 out of the 13 gangsters who have reached the mortal shedding stage mastery stage. Duan Lingtian could tell the intentions of the Heavenly Harm Guardian. Right now, other than the 5 martial or Dao cultivators who were at the mortal shedding stage master stage, almost all of the rest of the 13 gangsters were already in attendance. Haha, now that the Heavenly Leader Guardian has asked for a meeting in the assembly hall personally, it looks like there must be something interesting going on then. A peal of hearty laughter reverberated as a figure shot out of the second wooden house. Soon, it left the campsite of the latent dragon camp at a speed so fast that even Duan Lingtian could barely catch it. How fast? As expected from the second strongest person among the 13 gangsters. Duan Lingtian was taken aback. In the next instance, Duan Lingtian saw someone shoot out of the wooden houses with the numbers 3, 4, and 5 each respectively. They followed behind the person who came out of the second wooden house and left the latent dragon camp. It was apparent that they were heading to the assembly hall. Whoosh! At that very second, the Heavenly Harm Guardian had returned to the multi-story pavilion. He had already finished making his announcement. After Zhang Jilong threw a cold glance at Duan Lingtian, he also descended from the high platform and left the latent dragon camp. The other few members of the 13 gangsters also left one by one. At once, there were only Duan Lingtian and Guo Li left. Let's go, Guo Li motioned. Yes, Duan Lingtian nodded. However, when he left, he could not help but glance at the first wooden house a few times. Soon, he realized that there still seemed to be no sign of movement at all from that wooden house. Nobody came out of it even after a long time. Don't tell me that the owner of the first wooden house, the leader of the 13 gangsters, dares to obey the order given by the Heavenly Leader Guardian, the leader of the 36 guardians. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. After Duan Lingtian left with Guo Li, a commotion broke out in the entire latent dragon camp as all of them were no longer in fear. The Heavenly Leader Guardian, the leader of the 36 guardians, personally asked the 13 gangsters to assemble. I wonder what's actually going on. It's been quite some time since I reached this latent dragon camp and I've only seen the Heavenly Harm Guardian before out of all of the 36 guardians, let alone Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian. I've never even seen any other Lord Guardians before. Who told you to not cultivate harder? Otherwise, you could be part of the 13 gangsters and go to see Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian together too. Just as the group of latent dragon camp's members buried their heads in a discussion, Duan Lingtian and Guo Li had also reached the assembly hall in the city governor's estate. After they entered, they noticed 10 people already standing inside. Out of the 10 people, other than the 4 new faces, Duan Lingtian had some impression towards the other 6. He had seen them before in the latent dragon camp's campsite earlier. They were the few mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial and Dao cultivators of the 13 gangsters. Oh, new faces. Right at this moment, a sturdy, stocky, young man with an imposing build, who appeared to be crude and slipshod, looked at Duan Lingtian and Guo Li in astonishment. Are you two the new members of the 13 gangsters? Shanghu, it looks like you really have shut yourself in the room and are oblivious to whatever happens outside. The two of them are none other than the new latent dragon camp members who replaced Hu Lin and Li Han a month ago. A young, sturdy man, who looked as though he took a cynical attitude towards life, smiled as he chimed in. Not bad, not bad. Shanghu cast a glance at Duan Lingtian and Guo Li as he nodded. Is he the person who ranks second among the 13 gangsters? Looking at Shanghu, Duan Lingtian could tell that the voice of the person who came out of wooden house number 2 just now was exactly identical to this person. It was apparent that they were the same person. Good day to you guys. I'm Jin Yuan Bao who ranks 3rd among the 13 gangsters, just second only to that freak in this big block right here. Fanning himself, the luxuriously clad young man introduced himself as he looked at Duan Lingtian. Guo Li, the 13th of the 13 gangsters. Seeing how the person who ranked third among the 13 gangsters took the initiative to introduce himself, Guo Li neither dared to act highly nor slack. Duan Lingtian, the 6th of the 13 gangsters, Duan Lingtian continued to introduce himself after Guo Li. He was sort of fond of Jin Yuan Bao, who was exceptionally friendly. He was the kind of person who was usually open and poised. The 6th of the 13 gangsters. Upon hearing that, Jin Yuan Bao could not help but be taken aback. Isn't the 6th of the 13 gangsters Zhang Jilong? Then, he instantly looked at Zhang Jilong and asked in surprise, Zhang Jilong, were you actually defeated by a newbie? Even though Zhang Jilong was reluctant, he still had no other choice but to nod his head in admission. At the same time, he did not leave out his explanation. If his weapon had not been the archery set, he could have only come to a draw with me at the most. After battling it out with Duan Lingtian, of course, Zhang Jilong knew his weak point. It was also for this reason that he was very dissatisfied. HMPH. A loss is a loss, why do you wanna find so many excuses for? Don't tell me that if you're killed, you can still revive yourself and seek revenge on him. A plain-clothed, young man who stood at the side snorted in a low voice and snapped in disdain. Haha, Sun Jie, Zhang Jilong is already pissed that he's been defeated, so why did you need to pour salt on his wound again? The young man, whose eyes had never left Guo Li ever since she entered the door, finally retracted his gaze and shifted it towards the ordinary-clad young man. With a burst of deep laughter, he piped up. Zhang Jian, don't be a busybody. Sun Jie snorted. Are those Sun Jie, the 4th of the 13 gangsters, and Zhang Jian, the 5th of the 13 gangsters, who is also Hu Jia's distant cousin too? Duan Lingtian could still remember Sun Jie and Zhang Jian's silhouettes. They were none other than the people who had come out of wooden houses number 4 and 5. Junior sister Guo. Somehow, Zhang Jian had already gone to stand in front of Guo Li and greeted her with enthusiasm without the temperament of a mortal shedding stage mastery stage martial cultivator at all. However, there was a horny luster beaming in the depths of his gaze, revealing signs of his evil intentions. Of course, Guo Li noticed this. Coldly, she replied, I don't know you. You don't know me, but I know you. Zhang Jian grinned. You're the darling daughter of the Guo clan in Fuyu Town, and not only that, but you're also the strongest among the young generation of Fuyu Town too. I was lucky to have had the opportunity to accompany my father to visit your estate before. So, Guo Li's reaction remained as calm as just now. Junior sister Guo, let me introduce myself first. I'm Zhang Jian, the eldest son of the Zheng clan in the New South Town, who also ranks 5th among the 13 gangsters of the latent dragon camp. Zhang Jian introduced himself patiently. This time, Guo Li completely ignored him. No matter how much sweet talk Zhang Jian poured out, she completely ignored him nevertheless. In the end, Zhang Jian's expression changed to become extremely grave. You bitch, don't force me to get rough with you. Frostiness leaked out of Zhang Jian's eyes as he snapped in his heart. Haha, Zhang Jian, I realize that you can be quite despicable, huh? Can't you see that Miss Guo Li isn't interested in you at all? Yet, you can still talk so much. I really admire you, dude. Jin Yuan Bao threw his head behind as he guffawed unscrupulously, mocking Zhang Jian. Jin Yuan Bao, don't you push me too far. The moment Jin Yuan Bao's words left his mouth, Zhang Jian was so pissed that he glared at him ferociously with an extremely sour expression. Don't push you too far. So what if I push you too far? Come on, I'll give you a chance to defeat me. How about that? Upon hearing Zhang Jian's words, Jin Yuan Bao released a peal of brilliant laughter. With just one sentence, he pissed Zhang Jian off so much that his body kept trembling. His face was completely flushed and his eyes were bloodshot as though he was about to erupt anytime. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a draft blew into the assembly hall and caused the robes on the 12 people to flutter for a while before they finally stopped. The next instant, a figure appeared in the assembly hall. It was a plain-looking young man who carried a long sheathed sword on his back. Standing right there, he was extremely quiet. He did not make any sound at all. Is he the leader of the 13 gangsters? When the young man in green made his appearance, Duan Lingtian did not sense anything at all prior, and even when the wind blew past, he did not notice that it was actually a person. Instead, he thought that it was really just the wind. At once, he was taken by astonishment. The divine eye. In his curiosity, Duan Lingtian looked at the green-clad man and narrowed his eyes. 30 years old, mortal shedding stage, perfection stage. Upon probing the young man's age and cultivation base, Duan Lingtian was completely astounded. Mortal shedding stage, perfection stage at 30 years old. What kind of freak was this? Freak, you finally came, and here I thought that you were going to disobey Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian's order. The friendly Jin Yuan Bao squinted his eyes at the man in green and smiled. I'm not a freak, the man finally responded. His voice was so cold that it seemed to be able to turn water into ice. Freak. Upon hearing Jin Yuan Bao greet the green-clad young man, Duan Lingtian could not help but be reminded by the sentence that Jin Yuan Bao had uttered earlier. Good day to you guys. I'm Jin Yuan Bao, who ranks third among the 13 gangsters, just second only to that freak and that this big block right here. The big block in this sentence was none other than Shang Hu, the person who ranked second among the 13 gangsters. He's Ling Yun, the leader of the 13 gangsters. At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally got his confirmation. Chapter 1375. I thought the first 5 of the 13 gangsters are at mortal shedding stage, mastery stage. Duan Lingtian gasped. Could Ling Yun have just made a breakthrough recently? In the end, Duan Lingtian could only come up with such a conclusion. He also realized that the moment Ling Yun appeared, other than the friendly Jin Yuan Bao, all the others including Shang Hu, who ranked second among the 13 gangsters, had dread in their eyes when they looked at him. Good. All of you are here now. A voice echoed in the assembly hall, taking everyone including Duan Lingtian by surprise. Ling Yun was the only person standing right there, unwavering like a mountain, as though he was a statue. Ling Yun is so steady that it's absolutely blood-curdling, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Just at the second when the voice echoed in the air, a green figure also appeared in the main seat in the assembly hall. It was a middle-aged man clad in green. The moment the man appeared, a gush of powerful aura swept out from him and caused the surroundings to dim in color. Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian. At once, everybody including Ling Yu bowed towards him. Duan Lingtian and Guo Li bowed as well. Had it been only the two of them, they would not have been able to recognize this person at all. Is he the Heavenly Leader Guardian? One of the 36 guardians under the command of the governor of Mount Hill City. Duan Lingtian was taken aback secretly. After he raised his head, he began to study the middle-aged man. Before him stood the Heavenly Leader Guardian, who was also the leader of the 36 guardians. I asked all of you to come because I want to announce something. The Heavenly Leader Guardian did not beat around the bush as he announced. In 3 months, Lord City Governor will come out of his closed-door cultivation, and by that time, he will pick 2 to 3 disciples among the 13 of you. Was Lord City Governor going to pick his disciples? The moment these words left the Heavenly Leader Guardian's mouth, other than Duan Lingtian, everyone's eyes lit up right away. The city governor of Mount Hill City was a powerful person who was at the Saint Rudiment stage. He was the strongest person in the area encompassing Mount Hill City. If one became his disciple, one would definitely be able to rise directly to a high position without fail. Other than that, it would also be equivalent to obtaining powerful protection. Being the disciple of the governor of Mount Hill City, one would definitely be able to roam free around the city. Deep breaths filled the entire assembly hall at once. Other than Duan Lingtian, who maintained his calm, only Ling Yun among everyone else appeared to be more collected. However, desire could be seen pooling in his eyes as well. As for Duan Lingtian, it seemed like he did not give a damn at all. He was not putting a facade on. Instead, he really did not give a damn at all. Duan Lingtian's field of vision was completely different from the group of young geniuses there. In the opinions of these young geniuses, the governor of Mount Hill City, who was on the Saint Rudiment stage, was someone they needed to look up to and fear. On the contrary, in Duan Lingtian's opinion, the governor of Mount Hill City was merely an ordinary Saint Rudiment stage martial cultivator. Heavenly Leader Guardian did not miss Duan Lingtian's composure, and he could not help but praise in his heart, this little guy from the mortal continent that Ninth Brother has found isn't bad. He's yet to see the world, but he can still be this calm even after he heard that Lord City Governor is looking to recruit disciples. One could easily imagine that if Duan Lingtian knew what the Heavenly Leader Guardian was thinking right now, he would most likely itch to take his 7 treasures exquisite pagoda out and blow it up in size before slamming it violently on his head. Did he actually think that he had never seen the world before? Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian, may I ask how will Lord City Governor choose his direct disciple later on? Zhang Jilong asked in excitement. 3 months later, Lord City Governor will come out of his closed-door cultivation and will run a test on each of you. Of course, I have no idea what the test is going to be either, the Heavenly Leader Guardian replied, the reason I asked all of you to come is to remind you that within these 3 months, work as hard as you can so that you can build your strength as much as possible. 3 months later, whoever is eliminated from the 13 gangsters will have no chance to become the city governor's disciple. After the heavenly leader guardian had finished, he waved his hand and said, "All right, go back now." Right away, the remaining 11 people including Duan Lingtian and Ling Yun immediately disappeared from the assembly hall in just a flash, heading back towards the latent dragon camp. They were rushing back to cultivate. After Ling Yun cast a peculiar glance Duan Lingtian, he flew out as well. Guo Li is also another one. Even if you really want to elevate your strength, there's no need to be in such a mad rush, is there? Duan Lingtian smiled wryly before walking out of the assembly hall leisurely. He was not interested in becoming the disciple of the governor of Mount Hill City. Therefore, he was in no hurry to go back to cultivate. Wait a minute, just as Duan Lingtian was about to cross the threshold of the assembly hall, a voice echoed from behind him. It was none other than Heavenly Leader Guardian's voice. "Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian, did you call for me?" Looking at the Heavenly Leader Guardian, Duan Lingtian asked. To be honest, he was the most curious about the Heavenly Leader Guardian, this leader of the 36 guardians under the command of the governor of Mount Hill City. Just now, he had actually attempted to use his divine eye to probe the Heavenly Leader Guardian. However, the moment he remembered that Senior Lin, who was ranked 9th among the 36 guardians, was already at the mortal shedding stage paramount stage, he quickly dismissed his idea again. Duan Lingtian even suspected that this leader of the 36 guardians was actually at the Saint Rudiment stage just like the city governor of the Mount Hill City. Of course, this was all his own speculation. "I heard that you came from the mortal continent. Is that true?" Looking at Duan Lingtian, the Heavenly Leader Guardian asked. Yes, Duan Lingtian was not surprised that he knew about his origins. After all, he had reported his background before to Senior Lin, telling him that he was from the mortal continent. "Which mortal continent are you from?" "As far as I know, there are 3 mortal continents outside of Dao Martial Saint Land but only 2 of them have martial cultivators." "I came from the mortal continent that only houses martial cultivators," Duan Lingtian replied honestly. "I heard of that mortal continent before, it's called the Cloud Continent." The Heavenly Leader Guardian nodded his head wisely. "It looks like you're not from the same mortal continent as the city governor's disciple. If you two were from the same mortal continent, you two would definitely know each other." The city governor's disciple? Duan Lingtian was taken aback. "Is he from the mortal continent too?" "That's right." The Heavenly Leader Guardian nodded as he smiled. "Not only is he from the mortal continent, but he also possesses a remarkable one-of-a-kind talent. You'll definitely have the opportunity to come across him in the future." "All right." Duan Lingtian nodded. "Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian." Suddenly, Duan Lingtian was reminded about something. "Can I ask you a question?" "Sure. Do you know whether there's a Han clan among the 5 rated forces in the Dao Martial Saint Land?" Duan Lingtian asked. 5 rated force. The moment Duan Lingtian's words left his mouth, the Heavenly Leader Guardian's expression had already turned glum. A 5 rated force. To him, that was a presence that he could only watch from far away. "Lord Heavenly Leader Guardian, what's wrong?" Duan Lingtian could see that there seemed to be something wrong with the Heavenly Leader Guardian, so he was perplexed. He did not understand why the Heavenly Leader Guardian would change to become sullen so suddenly. Was there anything wrong? It was actually because the saint stones that Shui Nai had given him were mostly made up of 5th grade saint stones and a small part of them were 4th grade saint stones. Because of this, he suspected that the force behind her must be a 5th rated force in Dao Martial Saint Land. Of course, the reason he made such a speculation was also because of Guo Li's words. According to Guo Li, her Guo clan that she was in from Fuyu Town was a 9th rated force and they owned a 9th grade Saint Stone Reserve. The city governor's estate of Mount Hill City, on the other hand, was an 8th rated force and they owned an 8th grade Saint Stone Reserve. The 9th grade Saint Stone Reserve could produce some 8th grade Saint Stones. On the other hand, the 8th grade Saint Stone Reserve could produce some 7th grade Saint Stones. It was exactly by this deduction that he felt that the force that Shui Nai was in must be a 5th rated force in Dao Martial Saint Land. "Duan Lingtian, why did you ask this?" Taking a deep breath, the Heavenly Leader Guardian finally eased his turmoiled feelings and asked. "When I was in the mortal continent, I heard my grandfather tell me that when he was still young, he came across a man before. That man had the surname Han, and he claimed that he came from a 5th-rated force from Dao Martial Saint Land. Duan Lingtian randomly fabricated a story. He did not dare to reveal that he knew someone with the surname Han and who most likely came from a 5th-rated force from Dao Martial Saint Land. He did not want to bring too much complications for himself. On top of that, if he said that he knew somebody from the 5th-rated force, he would be doomed if it elicited greediness from somebody else who felt that he had obtained some goodies from that particular somebody from the 5th-rated force. After going through 2 reincarnations, along with the 2 reincarnations, memory of the rebirth Martial Emperor, Duan Lingtian could be said as a person who had been through 4 reincarnations. Of course, he would take everything into account. Oh, I see. Upon hearing that, the heavenly leader guardian breathed a sigh of relief. Last time, many people went to the mortal continent for a trip. However, they said that the conditions there are very poor and many people found it difficult to stay there for long. Duan Lingtian smiled wryly. Compared to Dao Martial Saint Land, of course, the conditions of the mortal continent was much worse. Casting aside all the others, the cultivation environment and resources in just the Guo clan that Guo Li was in alone, which was the 9th-rated force of Fuyu Town in Dao Martial Saint Land, already far surpassed all of the places in the Cloud Continent. As for the 5th-rated force, I don't really know either. Even our city governor's estate of our Mound Hill City is also only an 8th-rated force. Even that huge sect above our Mound Hill City is also only a 7th-rated force, the heavenly leader guardian replied. The 5th-rated force is just too far away from us. However, one thing I'm sure of is that there are many strong powerhouses in a 5th-rated force. There are at least 100 over Saint Stage powerhouses in it. The moment the heavenly leader guardian mentioned the Saint Stage powerhouse, respect sparked on his face. It was respect that rose from the bottom of his heart. All right, Duan Lingtian nodded. At the same time, he could not help but be taken aback. Wow, is the force that Shui Nai is in actually this strong? There are more than 100 over Saint Stage powerhouses in it. Isn't this a little too far-fetched? Duan Lingtian was completely consumed by bafflement. In the next instant, Duan Lingtian bade farewell to the heavenly leader guardian and proceeded to leave the assembly hall. What a rare genius. He's been cultivating all this while in the mortal continent, and he's able to enter the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage by 35 years old. If that disciple of Lord City Governor hadn't come here to Dao Martial Saint Land together with Lord City Governor earlier, he wouldn't have been able to even measure up to him, the heavenly leader guardian thought to himself. In the city governor's estate of Mound Hill City, of course, he is the most trusted leader of the 36 guardians, would understand about Lord City Governor the most. Chapter 1376. When Duan Lingtian went back to the latent dragon camp, he noticed that the other 12 gangsters other than him were all cultivating quietly in their room. As for the people who were living in the tattered wooden house underneath the high platform, they were still as laid back as before. However, 2 people from 2 wooden houses did not come out for a very long time. Those were the wooden houses that Hu Lin and Li Han dwelled in. Duan Lingtian did not notice this at all because after he went back, he had gone straight to his wooden house too. Of course, the wooden house that he was staying in now was wooden house number 6. Having defeated Zhang Jilong, he now replaced him and became the 6th member of the 13 gangsters, with merely 5 people on mortal shedding stage mastery stage in front of him. Wait a minute, it's actually one of them on mortal shedding stage perfection stage and the other 4 on mortal shedding stage mastery stage. Right at that moment, Duan Lingtian was reminded of Ling Yun, the young man in green who carried a long sheathed sword on his back and was also the leader of the 13 gangsters. Duan Lingtian had to admit that when he saw Ling Yun, he was reminded of Su Li, his best friend from his past. Unfortunately, he had never seen Su Li at all even up to when he left the Cloud Continent. The reason he was reminded of him was that Ling Yun was similar to Su Li. Of course, this was in terms of clothing only. After he had shut his door, Duan Lingtian entered the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Elder Huo, please wake me up 9 months later if I haven't roused yet, Duan Lingtian told Elder Huo and then rose up to the 2nd level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda to cultivate. Being inside the 2nd level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda was the equivalent of 3 months outside. The city governor of Mound Hill City would come out of his closed-door cultivation 3 months later. Then, he would perform some test and recruit 2 to 3 disciples or something. Duan Lingtian had no interest in that at all. Still, it was inconvenient for him to pull out of this, so he had no choice but to accompany Guo Li to join in the fun and maybe add this to his chest of experiences. If he accidentally became the disciple of the governor of Mount Hill City, well then, he would just let nature take its course. If the other members from the 13 gangsters knew about Duan Lingtian's thoughts, they would slap him hard. Even Guo Li would do that too. The reason they were cultivating to their utmost right now was to perform their best during the test that the governor of Mount Hill City set 3 months later, was it not? Becoming the disciple of the governor of Mount Hill City was one of their dreams come true. When Duan Lingtian thought of Guo Li, he instantly sighed to himself, he must really want to become the direct disciple to the governor of Mount Hill City. In his opinion, Guo Li was no doubt a pitiful person. She was a woman, yet she possessed an innate talent that was in no way inferior to men. Apart from that, she had to carry the heavy burden of expectations from her clan. All of these came at a price as well. No matter where she went, she was always in trepidation, fearing that somebody would make a sneak attack on her and kill her. If she could become the direct disciple of the governor of Mount Hill City, she no longer would need to live in fear anymore. If I could help you, I definitely would, Duan Lingtian muttered. Guo Li was one of the earliest people he had met when he arrived at Dao Marshal Saint Land. That time, he had killed 100 over obsidian pangolins in that ocean near Fuyu Island, and before he attracted even more ferocious wild beasts, Guo Li had given him a warning. Even though Guo Li's warning was in vain in the end, he still felt grateful towards her. After getting along with each other and after finding out more about her, he realized that she was actually a very kind girl. He did not wish to see such a sweet girl perish from this world. Even if such a day really came, he wished that it would be the day when her lifespan ended. With my cultivation speed, there's no doubt that I'd be able to break through to the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage in 9 months' time. This time, after I've made a breakthrough, I'll still need to spend some time cultivating the techniques in the Saint Grade Martial Tactic Colossal Arrow Light Arrow, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Soon, Duan Lingtian sat cross-legged in the air and began to cultivate with a 5th grade Saint Stone in his hand. The Heaven and Earth Spirit energy from the 2nd level of the 7 Treasures Exquisite Pagoda and the Heaven and Earth Spirit energy originating from the 5th grade Saint Stone continued to be absorbed by Duan Lingtian into his body before they were carried by the 9 dragons to go pass across the 15 Saint Veins. After passing through the 15 Saint Veins, it could already be considered that a Great Qi circulatory cycle had been completed. After completing the Great Qi circulatory cycle, the Heaven and Earth Spirit energy was also transformed into true energy and entered Duan Lingtian's Qi Si. The true energy in the Qi Si increased a little. Such a cycle repeated again and again as though it did not know the meaning of exhaustion. Cultivation was always so dry. Only by experiencing the most arduous hardship could one rise above the ordinary. Just when Duan Lingtian was doing his best cultivating and barging into the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage, a group of people roamed across the sky in an overbearing manner in mighty contingents to the south of Dao Marshal Saint Land. There were more than 300 of them. Their speed was so fast that it was horrendous. My goodness, what are those? At the same time, many people also saw the sky being blotted out by them and were all taken by surprise. What insane speed! My cultivation base is the mortal shedding stage paramount stage, but my speed is nowhere close to theirs. Someone at the mortal shedding stage paramount stage muttered. There was only bafflement on his face. Saint Rudiment stage. All these hundreds of people are at the Saint Rudiment stage, my goodness. There are so many Saint Rudiment stage powerhouses. Which 6-rated force has come swarming out like hornets from a nest? There are so many of them, it looks like they're planning to make it out to the ocean. I wonder what are they doing there though? I kinda want to follow them and see what they're up to actually, but the problem is that given my speed, I can't chase them at all. Many people looked up at the sky and stared as the hundreds of figures disappeared in the horizon, vanishing before their eyes. It took a long time for the anxiety in their hearts to be suppressed. Whoosh, 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 the swarm of people, who moved like a great flood, soared across the sky, entering the ocean region from the south of Dao Marshal Saint Land. Leading the swarm was a gigantic bear-type wild beast. The bear-type wild beast's eyes were completely red and its gigantic body was like a small mountain. This wild beast had speed so quick that in just the blink of an eye, it had already left the southern land of Dao Marshal Saint Land. On the back of this wild beast stood a yellow-clad girl. The childish look on this ultimately beautiful, delicate face on this girl had diminished. It was obvious that she was an unparalleled beauty who was going to leave her teenage years soon. However, the expression on the girl's face was glum. There was another peculiarly dressed middle-aged man by the side of the wild beast. His facial features were perfect, but the vicissitudes of life still left some signs behind on his face. Right then, looking at the teenage girl on the back of that wild beast, he smiled and reassured, "Shui Nai, don't worry. Your brother Ling Tian will be okay. Uncle Mu, thanks for accompanying me to look for brother Ling Tian." This girl in yellow was none other than Han Shui Nai. "Silly girl, there's no need to thank me." The middle-aged man shook his head before adding again, "As long as brother Ling Tian doesn't go to Dao Martial Saint Land, I'll definitely help you to find him." Great confidence reverberated in the middle-aged man's words. What a joke! This time, on just this trip alone, he had brought 50 powerhouses who were at the saint stage and above with him. There were at least another 260 people who were at the saint rudiment stage and above. Even if these people searched the entire sea region between Dao Martial Saint Land and the Cloud Continent, it would not take them very long. Well, of course, this was mainly because these people were extremely fast. All right, Han Shui Nai nodded, worry still apparent in her eyes. "Brother Ling Tian, please be safe. Otherwise, I, Shui Nai, will never forgive myself forever." Han Shui Nai thought secretly to herself. A young man's voice and expression kept appearing in her mind. It was none other than her brother Ling Tian. This formidable array of more than 300 people swept across, and wherever they flew past, they continued to set off a series of raging waves on the surface of the sea. These waves then splashed downwards and caused the wild beasts near to the ocean surface to be giddy and dazzled. Not far behind them, a hoary figure followed closely behind them like a shadow. This was an old man in gray who was skinny with just skin over his bones. However, his eyes seemed to be gleaming with dark green flames, making him look gruesome and unsettling. The old man was holding a cane that was made of some unknown material, and the dark green luster that was covering it matched his eyes, giving off a sense of blood-curdling aura. Are these people from the 5th or the 6th rated force? What are they actually doing heading to the south with such flourish? The south seems to be the mortal continent where the young master was in, the gray-clad old man muttered as a chill could be heard in his voice. I wonder how much has the young master grown now. Master asked me to wait for him at the southern part of Dao Martial Saint Land, but he still has yet to come till now. I heard that the cultivation speed of the mortal continent people is extremely slow. Perhaps, I still need to wait for a bit more then. However, these people are actually heading to the mortal continent that the young master is in, so I must go and ask about their purpose. I can't possibly let them disrupt the young master's growth. As the old man muttered, he vanished on the spot right away as though he had just disappeared into thin air. At the same time, a figure emerged in front of the contingent of 300 over people with the bear-type wild beast leading them. It turned out to be none other than the old man in gray who was following them just now. Boom! With just a raise of his hand, the cane on the old man's hand trembled as he pointed at the sky. Right away, vast energy exploded in the air and a barrier that descended from the sky spread out as though it was connecting the heaven and the earth together. At the same time, the contingent of people had also reached near him. Shit! The peculiarly dressed middle-aged man who was by the side of the bear-type wild beast had also noticed the barrier that suddenly appeared in front of them. His pale face turned horrified right away. Stop! With a sharp order from the middle-aged man, the massive contingent started to slow down, but they still made some distance forward due to the inertia. The one who slowed down first was the bear-type wild beast. After it had stopped, it threw his head back and roared. Sound waves rolled out and caused a gush of solid impact wave to appear in the sky. Bang! The impact wave exploded in the air, causing the space to quake a little. Heaven hell bear! An old voice cried out in surprise. Chapter 1377. In the next instance, an old man in gray who was holding a cane appeared in front of the contingent of 300 over people. With just his own strength, he made the battalion consisting 50 Saint stage powerhouses and more than 200 Saint rudiment stages powerhouse to come to a halt. Just from this, one could easily see just how formidable this old man was. Old man, who are you? Han Shui Nai, who was standing on the back of the wild beast, had now snapped back to reality and was glaring angrily at him. Why are you blocking our way? Little girl, how rude of you, haven't the adults in your house taught you some manners? The old man's eyes that were gleaming brilliantly with dark green flames stared fixedly at Han Shui Nai. Ah, right at this moment, Han Shui Nai finally saw the devilish gleam in his eyes. At once, she was struck with fear until the color drained from her face. Even her body could not help but start to tremble right away. One could easily imagine just how dreadful this old man was, to the point that he could make her, who was nicknamed the Little Devil, to be struck with fear like that. Shui Nai, watch your manners. Right at that moment, the peculiarly dressed middle-aged man who traveled in front with Han Shui Nai flew to the front and came to a stop in front of the gray-clad old man before bowing slightly. Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged man called out unhurriedly, "Senior." His tone was filled with respect. "You aren't bad. There are originally not many remarkable beastriders in Dao Martial Saint Land, and on top of that, it's even rarer to see a beastrider who could tame a wild beast such as the Heaven Hell Bear." The old man looked at the younger man and nodded before quickly looking at the Heaven Hell Bear again. Being scrutinized by the old man, the Heaven Hell Bear was struck with fear that it started to tremble too, so much so that it almost caused Han Shui Nai to fall off. Fortunately, the peculiarly dressed man snarled out in time and made the Heaven Hell Bear regain its calmness once again. Looking at the middle-aged man again, the old man said nonchalantly, "Tell me, what's your name? Perhaps I've heard of you before." "Senior, I'm called Mu Yi," replied the middle-aged man respectfully. "Mu Yi, I think I've heard of you before. Are you that genius beastrider from the Greenwave Han Mansion?" After pondering for a moment, the dark green flames in the old man's eyes flared as he asked. "You flatter me by calling me a genius beastrider. However, I, Mu Yi, am indeed from the Greenwave Han Mansion," Mu Yi responded humbly. "There's no need to be humble. The reason I blocked your way is to just ask one question. What is the reason for you, the Greenwave Han Mansion, to head to the south with such fanfare?" The old man in gray asked without beating around the bush. "To be honest, Senior, the reason we came here is to help our Miss search for a friend of hers. Her friend has gone missing in the vast ocean until now. We still haven't heard from him yet," Mu Yi replied honestly. "Is she the daughter of that Han Mansion master from the Greenwave Han Mansion?" "HMPH, she really lacks manners." The old man looked at Han Shui Nai again and snorted. If it were another person who was speaking to her like that, Han Shui Nai would have long been pissed off. However, this old man gave her a feeling as though she was wandering around the gates of death. On top of that, a person who could elicit such respect from her Uncle Mu meant that he must not have been somebody simple. For this reason, she chose to remain silent. Boom. Without warning, the old man raised his hand and pointed towards the sky again. At once, the barrier that seemed to connect the heaven and the earth disappeared without a trace, as though it had never once appeared. "Mu Yi, boy, I'll trust you this time. If, in the future, I find out that you've actually deceived me, I'll make a visit to the Greenwave Han Mansion." With that, his figure began to turn blurry. "Senior, may I ask who you are?" Seeing the gray-clad man about to leave, Mu Yi quickly asked. "I'm from the Azure Cloud Mansion," the ancient voice resonated again, only entering Mu Yi's ears alone. In the next second, his figure soon dissipated into nothingness. The Azure Cloud Mansion." Upon hearing the reply, Mu Yi's eyes narrowed right away. "He's from the Azure Cloud Mansion. Don't tell me that that was actually him. My goodness, what is he doing here?" Mu Yi's heartbeat sped up and was so fast that he felt like passing out. It was only after a long time that he was finally able to calm down again. No wonder he could perform such a technique that could cover the entire sky with just a raise of his hand. So, he's actually a powerhouse from the Azure Cloud Mansion. Gasping, Mu Yi was still trying to catch his breath. This time, Han Shui Nai realized that the old man had left and she finally dared to raise her head again. However, after she saw how her uncle was beyond himself, she could not help but ask, "Uncle Mu, what did the old man say to you?" She knew that that old man must have said something to him. Otherwise, given his temperament, he would have never lost his cool like that. "Shui Nai, you have to remember the next time if you happen to encounter him again, you must respect him. Even if your dad sees him, your dad would have to call him Senior, politely too," Mu Yi told her. The moment he recalled her reckless behavior just now, cold sweat broke out on his skin right away. "My dad needs to call him Senior, too." Han Shui Nai frowned. "Uncle Mu, just tell me, who is he actually? He must have told you, didn't he?" Upon hearing her question, Mu Yi smiled wryly. This girl was too smart. "Shui Nai, I can tell you, but you must first promise me that if you happen to come across him again, you must be polite," Mu Yi added. "I don't want to meet him again." Han Shui Nai snorted. "That old man is so ugly. My brother Ling Tian is much better looking." The moment she mentioned the word, brother Ling Tian, she could not help but sigh again. However, Soon, she broke out of her reverie as she looked at Mu Yi. Uncle Mu, hurry up and tell me who exactly is that old man. Shui Nai, if you don't promise me, I won't tell you. Mu Yi shook his head and snapped a little. At once, the bear underneath Han Shui Nai's feet flew out in an alarming manner as though it had transformed into a gigantic cannonball. Let's go. At the same time, Mu Yi issued his order to the 300-odd powerhouses and continued to make their journey. Uncle Mu, I'll promise you. Hurry up and tell me now. That old man, no, that senior, I mean. Who exactly is he? Han Shui Nai turned around to look questioningly at Mu Yi who had chased up with her. Right then, she had completely given in to him. He's from the Azure Cloud Mansion, Mu Yi revealed using his true energy voice transmission. Azure Cloud Mansion. Upon hearing that, Han Shui Nai's eyes narrowed as her face was completely covered in shock. My goodness, what is the freak from the Azure Cloud Mansion doing right here? I have no idea either, however, there seems to be something that he cares about in the south. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked us what we were doing. This time, no matter whether we can find your brother Ling Tian or not, we must go back. Mu Yi replied. We'll definitely find brother Ling Tian. Han Shui Nai answered with determination. Just as Han Shui Nai led the group of powerhouses from the Greenwave Han Mansion to search the boundless ocean on an inch-by-inch search, the person that they were looking for was quietly staying in a city by the sea in Dao Martial Saint Land. That city was called Mound Hill City. At the latent dragon camp in the city governor's estate in Mound Hill City. In Wooden House number 6, a small pagoda that had transformed to become the size of a dust speck was sitting modestly by the corner of a bed. Nobody would expect that such a small pagoda would actually have a world of its own inside. On the second level of the Seven Treasures exquisite pagoda, a purple-clad young man was sitting cross-legged in the air. Streams of clearly distinguishable heaven and earth spirit energy were merging into his body along with the air and became part of his body. The heaven and earth spirit energy stored in the 5th grade Saint Stone in his hand stretched out almost in a solid manner and entered his body too. Time continued to pass by quietly. After an indefinite amount of time, the entire physique of the young man sitting cross-legged on the bed started to rotate slowly. Gushes of faint true energy halo lit up around his body. It's finally full now. This chi that's only as big as a pigeon egg is actually like a bottomless pit. By the time I make a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage, what should I do with the chi that would be as big as the size of a chicken's egg then? Somehow, Duan Ling Tian had regained his consciousness and was no longer repeating his cultivation steps again and again numbly. Right at that moment, the chi between his brows that was as large as a pigeon egg had finally been filled. On top of that, even the 15 saint veins in his body had also been filled with true energy as well. Right now, it's time for me to start opening new saint veins. As long as I can open the saint veins, the chi will then be complete, Duan Ling Tian thought to himself, and he began to mobilize the true energy in the 15 saint veins. One must admit that opening the saint veins was a tedious process. Even though Duan Ling Tian had experienced it once before, he still could not get used to it yet. Now, he was going through it again for the second time and all he felt was agony. Ah, it's too painful. Opening saint veins was a good thing, but the process of opening the saint veins was heart-rending. I wonder which one would actually be more painful, this or giving birth. Duan Ling Tian had no idea why he would suddenly have this kind of thought. However, the moment this thought rose up in his mind, he quickly suppressed it. I forgot, in this world when the woman gives birth, as long as the mother's cultivation base is high, she can use her strength to reduce the unnecessary pain. Just as Duan Ling Tian was thinking about this, his 16 saint veins were successfully opened. Opening a saint vein was like switching on a light that guided the group of people in the dark to move forward. Gradually, the second saint vein, the third saint vein, the fourth, they were opened one by one. 17 saint veins. When all of the saint veins were fully opened, Duan Ling Tian's excited body gave a jolt and caused the true energy to slightly miss the path, sending him into another series of heart-wrenching pain all over and causing him to go silent again. 17 saint veins. 17. However, Duan Ling Tian's heart was still filled with excitement. During his mortal shedding stage early stage, he had opened 15 saint veins in his body. In his mortal shedding stage intermediate stage, he had opened 17 saint veins in his body. That was not the most important thing. I've opened 15 saint veins in my mortal shedding stage early stage and another 17 in my intermediate stage. In the future, I'll open at least 18 Saint Veins in my Mastery stage, 19 in my Perfection stage and 20 in my Paramount stage. Chapter 1378. Total them up altogether. I'll be able to open 89 Saint Veins when I reach the Paramount Mortal Shedding stage. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, his emotions that were originally calm started to stir in turmoil again. He knew that the opening of the 17 Saint Veins on the intermediate mortal shedding stage had given him a fresh, new future. Originally, he thought that by opening 16 Saint Veins on the intermediate mortal shedding stage and so on in the future, he would accumulate a total of 85 Saint Veins, which was already remarkable enough. In fact, even Gautama Buddha, the person who had opened the most Saint Veins among the natives on Yanhuang planet, had also achieved 85 Saint Veins in total. However, right now, the mutation that took place when he broke through to the intermediate mortal shedding stage had provided him an even better, or one could even say a freakier, future. So far, he could open at least 89 Saint Veins when he reached the Paramount Mortal Shedding stage. If another mutation happens when I make a breakthrough to the Mastery Mortal Shedding stage and another during the Perfection stage, and an even greater mutation at the Paramount stage, I'll be able to open up to 99 Saint Veins in the end in the Paramount Mortal Shedding stage. Duan Lingtian kept dreaming about this to himself. However, soon, Duan Lingtian snapped back to reality again. It looks like it's time for me to carry out the final step. In a heartbeat, he began to cultivate the 10th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, the 9 Dragons form. As he rapidly absorbed the heaven and earth spirit energy and transformed it into true energy, the true energy in the Qi began to gush out as well. At once, all 32 Saint Veins in Duan Lingtian's body began to be filled with true energy. Carried by the 9 dragons, they performed great Qi circulatory cycles again and again as though they did not know the meaning of exhaustion. The speed of the 9 dragons carrying the true energy became faster and faster. In the end, the 32 Saint Veins almost caught fire due to the constant friction. Now, gasping, Duan Lingtian's heart jolted. At that instant, the true energy in the 32 Saint Veins in his body rushed into the Qi that was the size of a pigeon egg with immense power, and right away, the Qi swelled. Ah! Intense pain spread throughout Duan Lingtian's brain nerves, causing him to growl uncontrollably. He was already clamping his teeth down in pain. Otherwise, he would already have cried out shrilly at the top of his lungs. However, after the intense pain, a wave of pleasure washed over him. Perhaps, it was the epitome of the saying, all sufferings have their rewards. With a surge of his spiritual energy, Duan Lingtian quickly noticed that the Qi between his eyebrows had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. Originally as big as a pigeon egg, it had now become the size of a chicken egg. However, although the Qi had become as large as a chicken egg, the true energy it contained was transported over from the Qi that was the size of a pigeon egg. Now that it was inside the chicken egg-sized Qi, it appeared to be very minute. It's another long and tedious process to fill the Qi that's the size of a chicken egg. However, by the time the Qi that size is completely filled, I'd have made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage master stage then, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Right at that second, Duan Lingtian's body that was sitting cross-legged stopped rotating, and as his eyes flew open wide and something flashed across them. After the Qi that was as large as a chicken egg appeared, Duan Lingtian had now completely made a breakthrough to the intermediate mortal shedding stage. Precisely then, Duan Lingtian felt that it seemed like not only his Qi had undergone a transformation. Even his body seemed to have undergone an earth-shattering transformation too. After giving it a try, Duan Lingtian realized that his strength was perfect on the intermediate mortal shedding stage. Even if an intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivator had developed his technique of the human rank top saint grade martial tactic to the highest stage, Duan Lingtian still had the confidence to defeat him in just the blink of an eye. Now that all his 36 Saint Veins were operating the true energy together, he had come to possess a body that was even much stronger than an intermediate mortal shedding stage 5-clawed divine dragon. This was Duan Lingtian's biggest force. Right now, my strength must be near the peak of the Mastery Mortal Shedding stage. Even an ordinary Mastery Mortal Shedding stage powerhouse is no match for me. After another round of attempt, he mastered an even more profound understanding of his own strength. When I was at the Mortal Shedding stage early stage, my strength was on par with that Zhang Long who was at the peak of the intermediate Mortal Shedding stage. However, with the help of the advantage of my archery set, I was still able to defeat him. Unless it's a Dao cultivator or a martial cultivator who excels in long-range attacks, not many people who are at the peak of the mastery mortal shedding stage would be able to become my match. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, a brilliant smile flashed across his face. For now, it's time for me to cultivate the techniques inside the colossal aerolite arrow, particularly that offensive technique, the aerolite shower. Only when I manage to hone the aerolite shower to the highest stage, then I can start cultivating the defensive technique in the colossal aerolite arrow, the colossal arrow bell. Duan Lingtian was looking forward to learning more about the colossal arrow bell. According to Shuai, all of the human rank top grade saint grade martial tactics like the colossal aerolite arrow that he cultivated would have a technique which basis depended upon the highest stage of the other technique. The strength of that kind of technique would be in no way inferior to the strength of an earth rank saint grade martial tactic. Only a saint stage powerhouse could cultivate the earth rank saint grade martial tactic. Now that Duan Lingtian had such fierce determination, he immediately acted upon it. He flew out and the sun-shooting bow appeared in his hand immediately. With a raise of his right hand, he shot out a true energy arrow and slid it onto the bowstring before releasing it. Aerolite shower. As true energy arrow soared up to the sky and then descended downwards, a true energy arrow shower that blotted out the entire sky fell as though a meteor shower had just occurred. Other than the aerolite shower, Duan Lingtian did not forget to cultivate the other techniques either. He was soon lost in time, cultivating his techniques. Without even noticing, half a year had already gone by since he entered the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Of course, this span of half a year was the time spent on the second level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda. Half a year was equal to 6 months. 3 days on the second level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda was equal to 1 day outside. In other words, 2 months had gone by outside. Ha 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 ha, a breakthrough. I've finally made a breakthrough. After 2 months' time, a burst of laughter broke the silence in the latent dragon camp, taking many young men and women in the tattered wooden houses by surprise. They walked out but nobody in the new wooden houses above the high platform was taken by surprise at all. The soundproofing of the wooden houses the 13 gangsters stayed in was much better. Who's the one yelling? How noisy, can't you just let us cultivate in peace? Many of the young men and women who walked out of the tattered wooden houses complained loudly. However, when they saw who walked out of the tattered wooden house laughing so ecstatically, they quickly shut their mouths up and did not make any more sound. This person who had just walked out of the tattered wooden house laughing was no stranger to them. It was none other than Hu Lin. Hu Lin used to be one of the 13 guardians, but 3 months ago, he was defeated, so he was eliminated from the 13 guardians. Now, after 3 months, did he just say that he just made a breakthrough? He was originally a martial cultivator at the intermediate mortal shedding stage, and now that he had broken through, he was now at the mastery mortal shedding stage. Did Hu Lin make a breakthrough to the mastery mortal shedding stage? At once, many people began to realize what was happening and cried in surprise. This is shocking news. Now that Hu Lin has made a breakthrough to the mastery mortal shedding stage, not only has his Qi undergone another transformation, but the number of saint veins must have also increased by a fair amount too. No martial or Dao cultivator on the intermediate mortal shedding stage will be able to defeat him now. Given Hu Lin's strength now, in addition to being able to enter the 13 guardians again, it would pose no problem for him to become among the 6 strongest too. That's right, Duan Lingtian, who's currently ranked 6th among the 13 guardians, is only a martial cultivator at the intermediate mortal shedding stage. Even though he has defeated Zhang Jilong, his strength is still only at the peak of the intermediate mortal shedding stage at the most. The peak of the intermediate mortal shedding stage and the mastery mortal shedding stage are 2 completely different levels. The young men and women from the tattered wooden houses continued to stream out non-stop and discussed among one another. All of them were waiting to watch the fun. They understood Hu Lin's personality very well. He could not do anything the last time, for he was no match for anyone among the 13 guardians, but now that he had made a breakthrough to the mastery mortal shedding stage, he would never be willing to sit still and would definitely enter the 13 guardians again. Soon, Hu Lin's actions affirmed the suspicions of the group of young people present. Boom! With both his feet stomping on the ground to the point that the ground cracked and formed fissures that appeared to be like spider webs, he flew up to the high platform and soon stood in front of the wooden house number 13. I, Hu Li, will challenge Guo Li, who is ranked 13th among the 13 guardians. Standing in front of the wooden house, Hu Lin announced unhurriedly. His voice was as loud as thunder, and with true energy boosting it, it spread into the wooden house. In the next second, the door opened. Guo Li walked out from the inside. However, her expression appeared to be slightly glum. No matter who it was, anybody would have a sullen face if one was being disturbed in the midst of their cultivation. Hu Lin, do you want to challenge me? Looking at Hu Lin, Guo Li asked in a deep voice. That's right. Today, I'll regain my reputation and defeat you, you little b*tch. Hu Lin grinned. So, you've made a breakthrough. As a flash glimpsed across Guo Li's eyes, she muttered with a slightly pale face. Since you know that I've already broken through, don't you think you need to admit defeat? You must know that it's basically impossible for an intermediate mortal shedding stage to fight a mastery mortal shedding stage. Hu Lin grinned proudly. Although his words seemed to be earnest with sincere intentions, nobody but he knew what his true intentions were. Admit defeat, Guo Li snorted in a low voice. I, Guo Li, have never admitted defeat. Don't blame me for being ruthless against a woman then. The smile on Hu Lin's face turned even wider. Guo Li's answer was exactly what he wanted to hear. If she had just admitted her defeat right away, he would have found it boring. Not admitting defeat was the best outcome he could possibly hope for. This could allow him to vent his enmity that had been accumulated for 3 months to his heart's content. The moment he recalled how he was eliminated from the 13 Guardians because of this little b*tch, rage and hatred filled his heart right away. He needed to release it out. I've now made a breakthrough to the mastery mortal shedding stage. I won't bully you either, so it's better for you to make your move first, Hu Lin announced nonchalantly. His words rendered the onlookers by the side speechless. All of them felt that he was shameless for having the guts to say such words. The fact that a mastery mortal shedding stage martial cultivator was going up against an intermediate mortal shedding stage martial cultivator was already an act of bullying. Chapter 1379. Even though Guo Li refused to admit defeat, her loss had already been destined from the very start when she faced Hu Lin, who had broken through to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage. For this reason, it only took one blow for him to defeat her. After he beat her, she did not become dejected, as being defeated by the hand of a mortal shedding stage mastery stage martial cultivator was not something shameless. As long as she could make a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage, she had faith that she would be able to regain her standing again. Guo Li, you'll soon see that your companion, Duan Lingtian, will be defeated by my hand too. After defeating Guo Li, Hu Lin smirked and then flew out. When he landed in front of the wooden house number 6, his voice resonated in the air. Duan Lingtian, I, Hu Lin, challenge you. The sound that contained true energy entered the house. The sound wave rushed into the wooden house through the gap of the wooden house and set off a series of faint breeze which blew and happened to sweep across the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda that was as tiny as a speck of dust. Right away, the space inside the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda turned turbulent for a moment. Duan Lingtian, who was cultivating in the 2nd level of the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda, could suddenly feel the earthquake. In the next instant, he realized that he was already expelled out by the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda. The first thing he felt was how terrible it was. Who's that? When Duan Lingtian returned to his senses, a blaze rose in his heart right away. By right, the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda that was in the wooden house should not be disturbed. Then, there was only one plausible reason. Somebody must have disturbed the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda. Just as Duan Lingtian was about to push the door open to go out and take a look at the culprit who made him expelled from the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda, the voice outside resonated again. Hu Lin. Upon hearing the magnified voice from Hu Lin posing a challenge to him and seeing how the sound wave contained in the voice set off a series of faint breeze, Duan Lingtian knew that it was the draft set off by Hu Lin's sound wave that had disrupted the 7 Treasures exquisite pagoda. Because of that, he was expelled. At once, Duan Lingtian's face turned very grave. That time, after he had gone through the experience of being expelled from the pagoda, he had made up his mind that he would never try it again unless it was absolutely necessary. However, right now, Hu Lin had made him go through such an upsetting feeling again. When Duan Lingtian pushed the door open and stepped outside, the onlookers by the surroundings including Guo Li could see his extremely ominous expression. Of course, nobody could guess the real reason behind his expression. Duan Lingtian's face seems to be very grave, even worse than how Guo Li looked when she just first appeared. Well, now that he's being challenged by Hu Lin, who has just made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage, I think he probably wishes he's dead now. He only came out after hesitating for a moment. It looks like he originally didn't want to at first, but after Hu Lin's constant calling, he had no choice but to come out in the end. The strength of the Mortal Shedding Stage Mastery Stage is insanely powerful. It appears that although Hu Lin has just made a breakthrough to the Mortal Shedding Stage Mastery Stage today, he's already going to become the top 6 among the 13 gangsters. Many people buried their heads in a discussion. All of them felt that it was basically a given for Hu Lin to defeat Duan Lingtian. I was wondering why you, Hu Lin, would have such impressive guts suddenly, so, it turns out that you've actually made a breakthrough. Not bad, not bad. After Duan Lingtian walked out of the wooden house, he looked at Hu Lin standing not far away and laughed in rage. Duan Lingtian, I first challenged Guo Li and she didn't even admit defeat even though she's a woman, you won't admit your defeat either, will you? Looking at him, Hu Lin mocked. His implied meaning was obvious. He did not want Duan Lingtian to just admit defeat right away. And now that he had said such words aloud, there was no doubt that Duan Lingtian would just be admitting that he was much inferior to a woman if he surrendered now. What, do you think he'll lose? Of course, Duan Lingtian could see through Hu Lin's intentions as he burst out laughing. Hu Lin had kinda overestimated himself a little, had he not? It's good that you won't then. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Hu Lin flashed a dazzling smile. In this case, I'll let you make your move first just like Guo Li, so that you won't say that I, at the Mortal Shedding Stage Mastery Stage, actually bullied the two of you who are at the Mortal Shedding Stage Intermediate Stage. Hu Li repeated the words that he had told Guo Li earlier. At once, the eyes of the onlookers who looked at Hu Lin were filled with contempt at once. They found Hu Lin to be absolutely shameless. How could he actually have the audacity to repeat such shameless words twice? Let me make my move first. Are you sure? Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed as he asked nonchalantly. That's right, Hu Lin nodded. At the same time, an iron staff appeared in his hand. It was his weapon that was an inconspicuous human-rank mediocre saint weapon. Even though he said that he would let Duan Lingtian make his move first, he still did not dare to be reckless, so he held his saint weapon in his hand. That's great. Great. As a brilliance flashed across Duan Lingtian's eyes, he took out a sun-shooting bow and solidified his true energy into an arrow. Nodding his head, he said unhurriedly, since you've let me make my move first, it's not nice for me to decline, so, I will do as you wish. Almost at the same time that the wish word was emphasized as he spat it out, he had already released his arrow. Body and arrow synchronization. Duan Lingtian's arrow was shot out without any reservations. It contained all of his brute strength and the true energy from the Qi also erupted on the spot through the 36 saint veins. One could say that just the moment Duan Lingtian made his move, he had already demonstrated the fastest speed that he could cast. As for how fast it was evident from the fact that Hu Lin could not catch what was happening at all even though he had already arrived in front of Duan Lingtian that he was blindingly swift. Hu Lin was originally holding an iron staff as he looked at Duan Lingtian vigilantly, but it had never crossed his mind that although he was so alert, Duan Lingtian could still reach in front of him before he could even realize what was happening. He felt like as though Duan Lingtian had just taken a stride to overcome the gap between them in just the blink of an eye. Fast. It was at breakneck speed. This was the only thought remained in Hu Lin's mind at that time. He did not even have the time to think as the iron staff in his hand trembled and he was about to cast the technique of the Saint-grade martial tactic. However, it had never crossed his mind that just when his iron staff shook and before he could even make his move, he was already enveloped by a powerful energy. It was Duan Lingtian who had reached in front of Hu Lin. Holding up his bow, without even performing any technique, he smashed it heavily upon the iron staff in Hu Lin's hand. Right at that moment, blood spouted out of both Hu Lin's hands, strewing everywhere in all directions. HMPH. As he grunted, despite the iron staff still being held in his hand, his grip had loosened a lot now. Clang. At that moment, a stifling thunderous sound exploded. It turned out that Duan Lingtian had plucked the bowstring of his sun-shooting bow, allowing it to be pulled into a slight arch before releasing it towards the iron staff. This time, Hu Lin could no longer hold on to the iron staff anymore. With a clang, it fell from his grip. The pain from Hu Lin's hand sent a heart-rending pain to his brain. However, he still held it down without even grunting, but terror could be seen in his eyes now. Has Duan Lingtian made a breakthrough to the Mortal Shedding Stage Mastery Stage 2? It must be so. It has to be. This was the only thought in his mind. After removing the iron staff from Hu Lin's hand with a clang, Duan Lingtian retrieved his sun-shooting bow and straightaway launched a body attack using his punches and kicked at Hu Lin. Without the help of his saint weapon, Hu Lin remained powerless to fight back under Duan Lingtian's punches and kicks. What a joke! The strength that Duan Lingtian displayed now could be comparable to a martial cultivator who was at the peak of the mortal shedding stage mastery stage. He could basically take down Hu Lin, this rash fellow who had just made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage, easily and was able to do anything that he liked to him. Thud, 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 Duan Lingtian's every punch and kick went deep into his body. As a series of dull thuds resonated in the air, it sent chills into the spines of the crowds watching by the side. Duan Lingtian's attack was very precise. Neither did he kill Hu Lin nor cripple him. Barf. Throughout this process, Hu Lin continued to spit out mouthfuls of blood again and again. In the end, he spat out so much that his soul almost left his body. Every time when he wanted to open his mouth to surrender, Duan Lingtian's punches would land on his chest, crashing into him until he could not make any sound at all. Gradually, he started to think that maybe it was better off dead. Right at this moment, even the heavenly harm guardian on the multi-story pavilion could not take it anymore, so he voiced out to stop them, "That's enough." Upon hearing that, Duan Lingtian did not dare to disobey the heavenly harm guardian's reputation. Kicking his leg out, his blow landed on Hu Lin's abdomen violently and sent him flying away. Hu Lin was beaten up so badly that he could barely move. At the mercy of the strength from Duan Lingtian's kick, he was sent flying in a perfect parabolic curve before crashing directly onto the manure pit. Splash! With a faint sound, Hu Lin fell into the manure pit. His entire body was covered in night soil. Whether it was because of the humiliation or because he could not stand the smell of the manure pit, Hu Lin was so pissed off that his eyes bulged widely before he suddenly passed out in the manure pit. The entire scene turned to become deadly silent. Whoosh! At that moment, the heavenly harm guardian left his multi-story pavilion and landed on the high platform. With a raise of his hand, true energy swept out and he used it to pull Hu Lin out of the manure pit before throwing him below the high platform. He had no choice but to do that. Otherwise, Hu Lin, who had already passed out, would definitely be drowned by the night soil in the manure pit. After doing all this, the heavenly harm guardian glared at Duan Lingtian and frowned. "Duan Lingtian, you're merciless in your attack." The moment the heavenly harm guardian's words left his mouth, the crowd who threw up upon seeing the night soil on Hu Lin began to return to their senses one by one. They deeply agreed with the heavenly harm guardian's words. At that moment, they could only feel fear when they gaped at Duan Lingtian again. "Merciless," Duan Lingtian snorted. "If it weren't because we're in the latent dragon camp, he'd have already been crippled, if not dead." The moment Hu Lin disturbed the Seven Treasures' exquisite pagoda and caused the pagoda to expel him, Hu Lin's outcome had already been destined not to have a good ending. "Duan Lingtian, have you made a breakthrough?" Guo Li, who retracted her gaze from Hu Lin, stared at Duan Lingtian and demanded in surprise. The moment Guo Li's words left her mouth, the heavenly harm guardian and the group of latent dragon camp members were quickly reminded about this. Earlier, Hu Lin, who was beaten to almost death by him, seemed to be at the mortal shedding stage mastery stage, was he not? "Yes, I just broke through." Duan Lingtian smiled and confirmed in the face of Guo Li's query. Upon hearing him acknowledge it personally, a commotion broke out again. "My God, Duan Lingtian has actually made a breakthrough too. Duan Lingtian has just made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage, but when he faced Hu Lin, who's also made the same breakthrough to the same stage, Hu Lin didn't even get a chance to make his attack at all. Don't you think this gap is just too ridiculous? Freak. Duan Lingtian is incredibly freaky." Chapter 1380. As the heavenly harm guardian cast a gentle true energy pat that landed on Hu Lin's chest, Hu Lin's body trembled. The moment he woke up, the night soil in his mouth spouted out maniacally. Barf. Right away, the group of young people below the high platform quickly retreated. There were thinly veiled hints of disgust in their eyes. This was a man who had just come out of a manure pit after all. Duan Lingtian. After Hu Lin had returned to his senses, he finally understood what had transpired to him. Instantly, the gaze that looked at the purple figure on the high platform was once again filled with venom. His body was now quivering violently in humiliation, rage, and hatred. "Duan Lingtian, if I don't kill you, I, Hu Lin, swear that I'm not human." With both of his eyes crimson red, Hu Lin was on the verge of breaking down now for the way he was humiliated in front of so many people. He continued to rage and roar in his heart while making Duan Lingtian his mortal enemy. Upon hearing Hu Lin shout his name out word for word, Duan Lingtian merely cast a nonchalant glance at him. Of course, he had noticed the hatred in Hu Lin's eyes, but he was not fazed by it at all. After Hu Lin consumed a pill and was finally able to stand up by force after resting for a while, he ran out of the latent dragon camp frantically, trying to find a place to wash himself off. Let alone the others, even he himself could not stand the stench on himself. After Hu Lin left, the streaks of gaze landed back onto Duan Lingtian in unison, making him the spotlight of the crowd. Guo Li. Duan Lingtian looked at Guo Li. He already knew that Guo Li had been defeated by Hu Lin and was now eliminated from the 13 gangsters. There's one more month to go. Don't worry, I have faith. Of course, Guo Li knew what he was going to say. With a nod and smile, she proceeded to walk to Wooden House number 12 and issued her challenge. The owner of the Wooden House number 12 was a Dao cultivator who was at the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage. This Dao cultivator of mortal shedding stage intermediate stage was ranked 11th among the 13 gangsters 3 months ago before Duan Lingtian and Guo Li were there. However, due to Duan Lingtian defeating Zhang Jilong and cutting the queue to enter the 6th place among the 13 gangsters, he was forced to retreat by 1 rank 2. Guo Li, do you want to challenge me? The Dao cultivator who walked out of the Wooden House was a young man dressed in a loose, long robe. He was also the only Dao cultivator among the 13 gangsters. One could easily imagine just how powerful this young Dao cultivator was just from the fact that he stood out among the group of mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial and Dao cultivators in the latent dragon camp and became a member of the 13 gangsters. Yes, Guo Li affirmed to the young man before taking an attacking pose. Dao cultivator. Duan Lingtian raised his brows. This would be his first time seeing a Dao cultivator make his moves after he came to Dao Martial Saint Land. I wonder what's the difference between the techniques the Dao cultivator here in Dao Martial Saint Land compared to the Dao cultivators that I've met at the overseas Saint Islands. Duan Lingtian could still remember that when he was still at Half Moon Island of the overseas Saint Island, the Dao cultivators that he met could easily mobilize a small thunder strike and rely on the awe-inspiring nature energy when they made their move. Compared to the martial cultivators, the Dao cultivators' technique was much more magnificent. Most importantly, they excelled in long-range offensive techniques. Once they had established the upper hand, the martial cultivators would basically be unable to get near to them. As Guo Li began to be locked in a battle with the young Dao cultivator, Duan Lingtian was shocked to see that the fight moves of this mortal shedding stage intermediate stage Dao cultivator did not seem to be as beautiful as the Dao cultivators he had met on Half Moon Island. Whoosh, 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 the loose, long robe on the young Dao cultivator fluttered, and in that instant, the wind blades that were twining around his body swept out towards Guo Li as they blotted the entire sky. No matter where Guo Li tried to escape to, they still kept chasing up to her. The loose, long robe on his body is his saint weapon. It was easy for Duan Lingtian to notice this. Ah! As Guo Li snarled out loud, the long black whip in her hand also gave a little start. In the twinkling of an eye, it became a barrier in front of her body. She had cast a defensive technique. Just when she cast the defensive technique, Guo Li dodged the wind blades and pounced forward towards the young Dao cultivator. Facing Guo Li, who was pouncing at him with all her might, the young Dao cultivator appeared to be particularly solemn as he soared after stomping on the ground. As he rose up into the air, a glimmer flashed across his eyes as he struck out with a hand saber. At that instant, all of the wind blades entwining around his body flew on top of his head and transformed to become a gigantic wind blade. It was like a gigantic blue saber that emitted gushes of sharp aura. In the next moment, the gigantic blue saber finally moved and hacked downwards towards Guo Li. The saber tip seemed to be able to tear through everything. When she saw the terrifying saber, Guo Li's face was extremely taut. With great difficulty, she barely dodged the attack. However, one could see that some strands of her black hair were cut in the air. It was easily imaginable just how alarmingly dangerous that moment was. Is that the Saint Grade Dao tactic? Wow, it's really amazing. If this were the Guo Li 3 months ago, she'd definitely be no match for him, but now, Duan Lingtian could see that although the Saint Grade Dao tactic that the young Dao cultivator performed was remarkable, the saber just now seemed to be his strongest technique. Furthermore, he could see through this from the expression of the young Dao cultivator. Just now, when Guo Li had dodged the attack of the saber just now, the young Dao cultivator's calm and collected face finally experienced a change. It was exactly as Duan Lingtian had predicted. After Guo Li had dodged the saber, she kept gaining the upper hand ever since. After 30 moves, she finally was able to get near him successfully and reached in front of the young Dao cultivator. Striking her palm out, a gust of wind was formed easily and it sent the young Dao cultivator flying with a blast. Thanks for letting me win. Guo Li nodded faintly at the slightly pale, young Dao cultivator who had now finally come to a halt after being sent flying for more than 10 meters away. Thanks for having mercy towards me. After taking a deep breath and swallowing a pill, the young Dao cultivator finally healed his injuries a little and went to the front of wooden house number 13, preparing to enter it to cultivate. I think unless you can defeat the person who's ranked before you, you don't really have to go in anymore, Guo Li reminded. What do you mean? The young Dao cultivator frowned. Soon, he heard a series of discussions coming from below the high platform and finally obtained his answer. Hu Lin had made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage. And not only that, but he also defeated Guo Li. The young Dao cultivator felt morose right away. One more month and the Lord City Governor would come out of his closed-door cultivation. By that time, he would set a test for the 13 gangsters and pick a disciple among them. If he were eliminated from the 13 guardians, he would lose the opportunity to join the test. Hu Lin is back, somebody shouted out loudly. Hu Lin, who had washed up and changed into a new set of clothes, was walking back into the latent dragon camp. However, his face was extremely grave. Well, of course. He had been thrown into the manure pit in front of so many people and anyone who was in his shoes would not be able to accept that. After Hu Lin entered the latent dragon camp, his icy gaze was always locked on Duan Lingtian. Right then, he wholly regarded Duan Lingtian as his mortal enemy. He would never rest until he killed him. Rising up to the high platform, Hu Lin challenged the 7th of the 13 gangsters. It was a mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial cultivator who had yet to make a breakthrough. He was someone whom Hu Lin was far from being able to compare to last time. Hu Lin, the moment he saw somebody challenging him, this mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial cultivator walked out. He was slightly taken by surprise the instant he noticed that it was Hu Lin. Having been cultivating with all his heart in the wooden house number 7, he did not know what had happened just now. As he smelled the stench from Hu Lin's body, he just casually voiced it out with a frown. Hu Lin, your body seems to have a smell. You kinda smell like the manure pit. It looks like Hu Lin didn't clean himself properly. Well, how do you expect him to clean himself properly? That's a manure pit, for God's sake. Many people whispered to each other under the high platform. Manure pit. Before the mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial cultivator who had just walked out of wooden house number 7 realized what was happening, a thunderous loud snarl had already exploded by his ear. You're going to die. It was none other than Hu Lin who was growling madly. With a raise of his hand, Hu Lin instantly sent the original owner of wooden house number 7 flying with just one blow. It was basically a given for him to defeat a mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial cultivator, having made a breakthrough to the mortal shedding stage mastery stage. Why, you've made a breakthrough? The mortal shedding stage intermediate stage martial cultivator, who was already defeated before he realized what was happening, stared at Hu Lin with shock in his eyes once again. HMPH. As Hu Lin snorted and swept an icy glance at where Duan Lingtian was standing, he brought his enmity and hatred with him as he strode into wooden house number 7. At once, the young Dao cultivator was eliminated. As for Guo Li, she had also returned to wooden house number 13. She was first defeated by Hu Li and then won against the young Dao cultivator. Therefore, she successfully remained behind at the high platform and retained the title of being part of the 13 gangsters. Then, the high platform regained its peace again. Duan Lingtian also returned to his wooden house, and after he had shut the door, he took out the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda. With a deep breath, he entered it and went up to the 2nd level before continuing to cultivate his Saint-grade martial tactic colossal arrow light arrow. Time passed by quietly. Duan Lingtian became even more adept in his mastery of the techniques in the colossal arrow light arrow. A month later would be the day when the governor of Mount Hill City came out of his closed-door cultivation. Among the 13 gangsters, except for Hu Lin, who had yet to learn about the fact that the city governor was going to recruit a disciple and other than Duan Lingtian, who had completely no interest in becoming the chosen disciple, the other 11 people worked with all their might to cultivate. After cultivating for 2 months in the 2nd level of the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda, Duan Lingtian came out of the pagoda. It was not that he did not want to continue to cultivate, but it was then he kind of felt numb cultivating until then. He knew that this feeling was caused by his rush and desperation. Right now, he needed to catch his breath first. I've yet to go out of the city governor's estate, although I've already been here for so long. Now that my cultivation base has finally improved in such a short period, and the colossal aerolite arrow has also reached its bottleneck now, it's time for me to go out to catch my breath. In a heartbeat, Duan Ling Tian retrieved his 7 treasures exquisite pagoda and walked out of wooden house number 6. After he exited, he walked to the multi-story pavilion right away. If any member of the Latent Dragon Camp wanted to leave the campsite, they would need to report to the overseer of the Latent Dragon Camp, the Heavenly Harm Guardian. The moment Duan Ling Tian reached the front of the pavilion, he heard an icy voice resonate in the air. You've left the Latent Dragon Camp once 20 days ago without even reporting anything to me. For this reason, unless it's an order from the city governor's estate, you're not allowed to step out of the Latent Dragon Camp for the next 3 months. It was the voice of the Heavenly Harm Guardian.